Jedi I've seen is like all over town, like you know that it's Jay. I love those sunglasses. Shane doesn't like them either. He made fun of them the first day I got them. He made a complex every time I wear them. It is totally. I look bad.
All right. I'll call the meeting to order, the regular council meeting of July 6th, 2026. Just a note, Councillor Gale sends her regrets. I believe she's off lobbying the Alberta government currently, which she seems to be pretty effective at. But the first item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Singh?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Any conversation? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Carried. Nothing on the consent agenda. Let's go through minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the previous minutes? Councillor McDonald.
I make that motion.
All in favor? Carried. No public hearings, no delegations, straight into business. That gives us item 7A, Cochrane Schools Status Report. And we are being joined by Mr. Eau Claire, Manager of Planning Services.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Administration has been requested to present the findings of the school status report, which was originally submitted to Council as a consent item on June 8th of this year. In previous years, administration has presented the school status report in Q1. However, to better reflect the school board's priorities of upcoming years, administration will now present the report in Q2 to include the school board's updated 3-year capital plans, which are finalized at the end of March each year. The purpose of this report is to provide council with updates regarding school site availability and highlight the priorities for local school boards by examining their latest 3-year capital plans. This report may also be viewed as an informative tool to better understand how schools are funded, planned, and the amount of time that it is required to build a school. School planning is a multi-layered process that is guided by various documents. Envision Cochrane 2050 is the frontline document that sets general policies for our growth and development. At area structure plan level, administration works directly with all 3 school boards, being Rocky View Schools, Calgary Catholic, and Franco Sud, to determine how many and what type of schools would be required within an area structure plan. This information is conveyed to the developer to determine how much municipal reserve will be dedicated to schools and parks. At this stage, schools are generally identified on the map, but they lack detail. School sites at the neighborhood plan stage, however, become more defined in their location, shape, and size, and details such as transportation infrastructure are better determined. Subdivision creates the legal parcels. School sites in Cochrane are typically zoned as community service. School sites comprise of 2 parcels. There's the smaller school envelope. That's the parcel that contains the building, the parking lot, and the portable classrooms. This is given school reserve designation. The larger parcels that contain the ball fields and programmable space are given municipal and school reserve designation. The province recognizes subdivided school sites as being eligible to receive pre-planning funding if they are listed as high priorities in the 3-year capital plans. Once funding is granted, school contractors can start preparing and submitting plans to the town, starting with the development permit application and ending, of course, with building permits. There are 4 phases for school funding in the province. The first is the pre-planning stage, which usually involves area studies, analysis, and there could be public engagement. The planning stage identifies the project scope, schedule, and readiness. It may also include preliminary site and building concepts. The design stage involves all the tender-ready drawings, including site plans, architectural, engineering, and landscaping designs. These drawings, along with other supporting studies, comprise of the development permit submittal. The construction stage is the building stage of the project, which begins in the tendering of construction contractors and ends with the completion of the project. The school boards compete for funding against other school boards throughout the province. Funding is usually awarded to projects that are deemed to have the most critical need. Although school boards list their top priorities in the 3-year capital plan, it may take years before the projects are approved for funding. However, once a school project is approved, it usually takes about 4 years from pre-design to the actual construction of the school. Last year, Bills 50 and 51 were passed, which enact the province to now own all of the new public school sites in Alberta. With this new law, the province will own the entire school site and lease it back to the school boards, allowing them to focus on the business of education rather than the building and the maintenance. Oops, sorry. Previously, the school building portion of the site was owned by the school board solely, and the ball fields were co-owned between the school boards and the town. However, as the new law is written, the entire school site will now be transferred to the province. This may become problematic for the town since a large portion of the town's MR is comprised of school play fields. So administration has raised some questions over who is responsible for the maintenance of the ball fields. Does the town still have control of the ball fields and event programming? Does the province have the ability to sell off these lands if school is no longer viable? And if so, does the town have right of first refusal? Administration has been asking the province to provide a little bit more clarity on these concerns and hasn't received answers yet. The current student enrollment distribution in Cochrane is approximately 88% to Rocky View Schools, 9% to Calgary Catholic, and the remaining 3% to Franco-Sud. This distribution of students is reflected in the distribution of schools in Cochrane, with Calgary Catholic having 1 K-8 school being Holy Spirit and Fireside, 1 high school being St. Timothy's. The only Franco-Sud school is École Notre-Dame de Valais, which currently serves as K-12. All the other existing schools in Cochrane belong to Rocky View Schools. Here's a map that shows all existing and future school sites in Cochrane. The color coding is based on the school board's possessions, so there is a total of 20 identified school sites in Cochrane, 12 active school sites, with an additional 8 in different stages of readiness and planning. Rocky View Schools has a total of 14 school sites, 9 of which are existing schools. Calgary Catholic has 2 existing schools and then 2 vacant school sites, and Franco-Sud currently has 1 operational school with a new site recently approved for pre-planning funding in Southwell Landing. This map depicts all the remaining approved, planned, or unplanned school sites that currently exist in Cochrane. They are all ranked in order of priority from their respective school boards. Rocky View Schools' top 3 ranked schools have all been approved and are in various stages of planning or construction. Along with the newly proposed high school in Horse Creek, the next 2 schools in Rocky View Schools' list of priorities are clustered in the northwest Cochrane in the growing communities of Heartland and Heritage Hills. The other cluster of future school sites are concentrated in the southeast portion of Cochrane within the communities of River Heights and Southwell Landing. Looking at each school board's 3-year capital plans, I will just highlight some information starting with Rocky View Schools. Enrollment was slightly down from the previous year, although Rocky View Schools is projecting a bump of 1,200 students by the 2028-2029 school year. Standard school utilization targets are 85% capacity. Rocky View Elementary Schools as a whole were slightly below that. However, the 2 high schools are over capacity. To alleviate the high school student pressures, Bow Valley High is completing their expansion, and then funding for Horse Creek High School has just been awarded this past spring. In terms of future priorities in Cochrane, Heartland K-5 school is listed as their priority number 1 in Rocky View Schools capital plan, followed by priority 8 for Heritage Hills and 11 for Southwell Landing. Calgary Catholic School Division, their 2 existing schools are currently operating below their capacities. Enrollment is projected to increase by 350 students by 2030. Calgary Catholic School Division plans to create a solutions project where they would build a new high school facility on their 12-acre site in Southbow Landing. Once that is completed, the students from St. Timothy's would be relocated to that new school facility, and then St. Timothy's would be reconfigured and updated to become a new K-8 school. This potential project is listed as medium priority for Calgary Catholic School Division, appearing as number 13 on their priority list. École Notre Dame de Valais is Franco-Soud's only school site in Cochrane, accommodating 216 K-12 students and running at 90% capacity, but is projected to run to reach 109% by 2028. Earlier this year, council endorsed a letter from the town that supported Franco-Soud to explore the northern Southbow Landing site for a new secondary school facility. Days later, upon receiving the letter, the province awarded pre-planning funding to Franco-Soud for the Southbow Landing site. That planning is ongoing as Franco-Soud works through those requirements. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And I'm joined by Mark Krasinski, Director of Community Growth, to aid me in any questions you may have.
All right, Councillor Wilson, can I get a motion on the floor to start the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I wasn't down at the motion portion of the package, but it looks like I'd move option 1, council accepts this report as information. Thank you for the presentations. It generated 3 questions with me if I could. First question, with the new process where it says town will consult with high school boards during the ASP planning process, I'm wondering if this new process is likely to result in less sterilized sites like we currently have that are eventually deemed unusable in town. I'm thinking Bow Ridge site, for example. Are we more likely to see less sterilized sites with this new plan we have in place?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, that is correct. The specific situation that you're referencing, I would say is a little bit more of an anomaly. It did occur, but we've had a lot of school sites that have been reviewed and approved through area structure plans since, and we have not encountered that same problem, same issue. So I would agree that will help alleviate that process, and very similar to the previous approach we had as well, but one that evolved after the Bow Ridge site.
Okay, the new novel process is that the schools themselves would actually come in early in the ASP process and give their opinion on if the site is useful to them. Is that what I understand is new about it?
Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, yes, they are circulated to and engaged during the area structure plan application process, where they have an opportunity to express their needs and interests in school sites. Okay, excellent. That sounds like a good thing for all users involved in the town. The one that concerns me here is with the new bill here, it says administration has rightly raised many concerns that I would share as I read through this. Can I assume that we can expect more downloaded costs here to our town with the new bill? For example, will there be higher operational obligations due to the new provincial bill, or what do you foresee for financially for us? Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, a little bit outside of our portfolio to comment on specifically. However, I would say at this stage, it's we're still working through getting responses from the province and greater clarity on those issues. So it's not fully resolved just yet. We've raised some potential concerns that Kevin Blanchett's team in strategic services through intergovernmental affairs are working through at this time, but we're still awaiting additional responses and clarity with respect to the concerns that we've identified. At this point, I don't believe we're looking at necessarily higher operational costs, but more perhaps a loss of control. How we plan to program the sites, which we're looking again for greater clarity on. I don't believe we have formal clarity on those specifics just yet. Just to help me understand, I think we currently, as a municipality, we currently maintain the rec fields around school sites. The only difference would be the ownership model would change from the town owning them to the GOA owning the school site, the fields. Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, that is correct. We are also seeking clarity though with respect to who would be responsible for the maintenance operations and at which point ownership would transfer. I think as Mr. O'Clair mentioned in his presentation, we've inquired whether or not there'd be potential for the municipality to retain ownership of the ball fields as part of this, this new bill. But again, I think a few wrinkles to work out, and I'm sure there's other municipalities who are looking to gain insight similar to us as to how some of the specifics will work.
Yeah, okay. Your questions in the package were the same ones that came to mind as I was reading it, so well done there. And then just for clarity, for new high school sites, very soon we'll be at 4.5. If I read that last slide correctly, it'll be Cochrane High, Bow Valley, a new Catholic school in South Bow, a future Horse Creek school, and then the 0.5 would be the Franco Sud featuring high schoolers. Do I have that right?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, that's correct.
Right, because we're swapping a St. Tim's for a site in South Bow was the...
Through the Mayor to Councillor Wilson, that is our understanding of the current plan. Of course, that's subject to change based on the decisions and analysis of Calgary Catholic Schools.
I understand that's not our decision, just to help public understand where we're heading. Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Councillor Verdejo.
Thank you. That was one reason why I wanted to have this report brought out to the public, was specifically about St. Tim's. Because as families start to move into the area, I think it's important that, even though it's not a confirmed decision at all, but it is important for people to realize that that school site that they might assume is a high school could become a K-8 and vice versa. I think it's important for the community to know that going forward. To Councillor Wilson's point, while we look forward to having 4.5 schools eventually, we only have 2, right? Horse Creek is only design funding, right? We have no build funding yet that's been announced.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Verdejo, I believe we're just at the funding right now for the design, but anticipated that it will be successful as it's shovel ready and very close to being ready to move forward. Yeah.
Okay, and do we know once, and you might not know this, but how much pressure, once that expansion of Bow Valley High is done, how much more of an expansion that will help alleviate some of the overcrowdedness?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Verdejo, I believe it's in the range of about 400 students, but maybe I'll let Rob O'Clair if he can confirm. Yeah. We can come back with the exact number of students that is expanding.
Yeah, because I mean, as great as it sounds to have 4.5, I mean, I think we're a number of years away from having 4.5 functional high schools. So I just wanted to kind of flag that. And my last question is, do we find a solution? I know that Franco Sud has their high school in South Bow. Have we found a solution for another parcel of land for Rocky View schools?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Verdejo, no, we have not found a solution yet. We're still in the process of waiting to have a conversation with them. But I know that there's been some conversations at higher levels in the organization, but at this point, planning services has not been engaged by Rocky View School Division.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We have no other comments. My colleagues pretty much covered it all. Thanks for the presentation. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next up, water and wastewater master plan update. I believe Mr. Heineman's coming up first.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to take a moment to formally introduce you to Adam Sulo. I know many of you know him and spent time with him at strategic retreat about a week ago, but obviously he's our new Executive Director of Engineering and Planning, effective June 22nd. So I didn't only want to introduce him to you, but also to people watching at home and give a little bit of background on Adam. Since joining the town in March of 2025 as the Director of Engineering, Adam has consistently demonstrated strong leadership. He's been instrumental in building and supporting a high-performing engineering team, and his efforts have had significantly enhanced our internal capacity and project delivery standards. Adam brings 20 years of experience as a professional engineer from both the private sector as well as in the public sector. Prior to joining Cochrane, he served as the Director of Engineering and Transportation for the municipality of Chatham-Kent, Ontario, where he led transformative projects in asset management, business process development, and public communications. In addition to his technical expertise, Adam's background in coaching and leadership ensures that he will be well positioned to guide the engineering and planning department through the upcoming strategic priorities. I'm confident that Adam is going to be a vital member of the executive leadership team. Really excited to have him on our team, and I'm sure you will see a number of the some of the great work that he's already doing for us as he's coming up to present the next following item. So just wanted to take an opportunity to welcome Adam to our team formally. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and the public. We're going to be talking first about our water and wastewater master plan, which was recently updated, the report prepared for this year. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So starting with a little bit of history on utility master planning within the town of Cochrane. Our previous master plan was completed in 2012, which is a considerable amount of time ago. The town has experienced significant growth since that time. And a significant infrastructure expansion to go along with that. The study was initiated in 2023 and completed in 2026, and I want to just put something out there. The data that we used in this report is from 2023. I understand that we've experienced a lot of growth in the last 3 years, and this just speaks to our capacity to deliver. So prior to me starting, this has been worked on for a number of years. It's something we need to move a little bit faster on in the future, and we know that. The goal of this is to provide a long-term framework for utility planning within the town boundary. The plan horizon is to 2046. So most utility master planning or master planning in this space, we typically try to plan for a 20-year time horizon. And the goal is to support both, not only future growth, but trying to maintain the idea of reliable service delivery. So a little bit on the purpose of the master plan. It's a continuum, as you can see on the screen here. So the initial portion of that is assessing the existing infrastructure, not only looking at capacity, but also taking the idea of condition, looking at capacity constraints we have within our existing systems, using that information to establish priorities, inform our long-term capital planning, support the offsite levy updates, and then support asset management as part of that as well. Planning for growth. So the focus of the utility master plan was managing growth within the current municipal boundaries, and while also considering growth beyond. We did not get into detailed plans about servicing beyond our boundaries, but just spoke to it cursory in the report, which you have access to within the council agenda. Evaluating future redevelopment and infill opportunities within the established communities and maintaining service levels as growth occurs, and ensuring that we're timing our investments appropriately. So the current population in 2026 is currently around 39,500. The projected population used in this study to 2046 was using a constant 4% growth rate of 86,600 people. Keeping in mind a 3% growth rate by 2046 would take us to approximately 70,000 people, and 2% would take us to approximately 60,000 people within the planning horizon. Again, these are all for the purposes of planning. The investments are laid out in here, but we're not asking for those today. This is mainly an update to the long-range plan. So you're looking at the map of the town boundary. The green areas you can kind of see in the legend. I know it's hard to read from a distance. Those are the developable areas that are either under development or planned for development in the future. The blue areas on the screen are opportunities for infill, and then the purple areas there are areas for consideration but no planned servicing at this time. We looked at these areas in a cursory sense but not look at detailed servicing plans for these areas. I think what's important to note was identified within the study that the town boundary has a capacity of to service a population of approximately 68,000 to 77,000 people. It's important to understand this, that even without annexation, we have the possibility to grow within our existing boundary to those numbers. This includes all lands within the town boundary, including ag, seminary, and Franciscan lands, understanding that they're not serviced at this time and it may be incredibly challenging to service those sites. So key findings from the utility master plan. I would say overall we have a very well-performing system. We have very minimal leaks compared to our counterparts across the country. And one of the lowest water uses I've seen per customer across Canada at 270 liters per capita per day. This is an impressive feat, and it helps us to manage our system very well. I would expect as our system ages that leakage number will increase. It does happen. Also, if we continue to focus on diversifying our tax base, it will likely grow as business grows in the community as well, the water usage, I mean. Our current water license should comfortably help us achieve 25 years of growth with 20 years of growth with approximately 86,000 people. Our water treatment capacity will have to expand to meet that though. So how will this plan be used? Again, very, very clearly on the screen, as you can see, very much so for the idea of capital budget planning to understand where we need to spend our time. Help us around the idea of development servicing decisions, as well as in the redevelopment areas. You'll notice in some of the recommendations, it speaks to a number of things, especially around the idea of fire flow within our established areas. It'll help us lead to offsite levy updates, determine future infrastructure investment decisions, help us sequence and plan growth, and with asset management initiatives as well. Future updates to this plan in 2027, making sure I didn't make a spelling mistake there, we'll be moving forward to complete our stormwater master plan. It's already initiated. The water master plan is looking at an update in 2028, and this is more about the idea of not just about growth, but about redundancy in our system, which is something that we need to have a conversation about. And then in 2030, we'd be updating our wastewater master plan, and this would be further firming up timing for infrastructure investments, as we need to be very mindful of that as we move forward, as they take a long time to plan. Financial implications for today. There's no immediate financial impact from adoption of the utility master plan. The plan identifies the future infrastructure requirements as well as the roadmap for investment, but we're not committing to any funding for specific projects today. Future projects will return through normal budgetary processes for council approval, and adoption will provide strategic direction, but not specific project approval. So the recommended action today is that council adopt the 2026 water and wastewater master plan update as presented. The benefits of this are establishing that long-term infrastructure framework, supporting responsible growth. A lot of the recommendations you'll note in there, and I have them on here if we want to go through them at all after my presentation, are about maintaining sustainable growth within our existing areas and our future areas, and being responsible about that. Maintaining service reliability, supporting fire protection requirements within the established communities, and informing future capital planning and levy updates. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, and I'm happy to bring up the recommendations if council would like to discuss any of them specifically.
Councilor, could I get a motion on the floor? Councilor McFadden?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move option 1, that council adopt the 2026 water and wastewater master plan update as presented. So I just wanted to confirm what this plan does is forecasts out our infrastructure needs and the planning or investments in that over the next 20 years to build out the growth within the current boundaries is what this does. In addition to, I did like the highlight on this, and also to support the fire protection requirements. So this allows for the continuing build out within the existing boundaries, to replace any infrastructure needed within the existing boundaries, and also support our fire coverage. That's the 3 highlights of the plan.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councilor McFadden. Yes, that's correct. Those are the primary highlights of this. It's very much about setting that initial plan. There's further investigations that have to be done to make sure that which we're undertaking right now, and then the responsible growth, protecting fire flow particularly. So.
And then, like any other plan, any actual investments, that decision to go or no go will come to council for a vote either during budget or at other times throughout the year.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then my third question, you'd perfectly mentioned that it might be or it could be quite difficult to provide services to the ag grounds and the other sites while actually like ensuring that we have enough water utility capacity to do that. Could you speak or provide some clarity to me around what it would take to service the ag grounds?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Right now, there is not enough water storage capacity in that area to service that, so we would require a significant expansion to water storage reservoirs in the area, as well as we would have to introduce additional lift stations for sanitary servicing, which are not just currently, the servicing is not on their doorstep currently, basically, so it would be the expansion of that. And the areas that I'm speaking about in the community, you can understand, have a tremendous amount of grade associated with them, so they require a significant amount of infrastructure to manage that grade. Okay. Not just the earthworks themselves, but you could have different pressure zones across those areas, as well as depending on how it's planned, you may need multiple lift stations to service it from a wastewater standpoint as well, depending on how it's planned, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, all right, thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Good to have this conversation in council chambers, and good to talk to you previously, Adam, in some of our strategic planning sessions about this topic. Just to touch on some of the things we've talked about there, and we'll come forward with this plan. I understand that some of all of the outline projects basically represent what admin has termed non-discretionary capital projects, meaning council's main decision points are simply timing and not whether to proceed with them or not. You could weigh in there if you'd like, and then I had a follow-up question.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson. I think in the utility master plan, I think there's projects that everything is at council's discretion in the end. Certainly it's council's decision whether to proceed on any project. I don't know that I would say every single project in here would be, I don't know if I would describe it as mandatory or not, but I think a lot of them are idea of supporting long-term healthy utility infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay. This one's a little harder, and I was just looking for ballparks or order of magnitude, but approximately what is the cost of the non-discretionary capital projects in an order of magnitude? And how many of the projects are growth-driven versus life cycling of assets? In other words, if we stop growing permanently, how many of these would be avoided altogether? If you could speak in broad strokes to that, I know that's a big question for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, Councillor Wilson, I don't have that in front of me this evening. I could certainly work to get that to you, so.
Okay, well, I would appreciate when we next talk about this, that's the kind of lens I'd like to take with it, so I knew that would be a tough question on the spot.
Councillor Wilson, if I may, I think the next presentation that Adam is doing this evening will be on the capital projects, where you'll get more information related to that. This is mainly for the utilities. Okay.
So I was next going to go into a few debt limit questions and some offsite levy questions, but those are probably best held to the next presentation. Does that sound right?
It doesn't hurt to ask now, I would say.
Okay, I'll just throw them out there and we can just come back to them if they're more appropriate at the next one. I don't need to ask them here if not. I was going to ask about what the impact of these non-discretionary projects are likely to have to our municipal debt limit. That's something we've talked about in strategic sessions, but I just thought it'd be a good thing to get out here and chambers, and when we are projected to exceed this debt limit. I believe it's 2030, 2031 from some of our talks, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, through the mayor, that will be appropriate for the next conversation, next presentation, yes.
Okay, and then when I was going to ask about the offsite levy funding mechanisms, is that more appropriate to the next presentation?
I think it may be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic, and I've got a third one that I can already tell that I'll save, so thank you. I'll come back to the next one.
Councillor Fidego.
A quick question for you. I know that the last plan was updated 2012, and now we're sitting at 2026, so we're 24 years. And I know that this plan should last us for the next 20 years. However, would it be fair to say that perhaps if growth stayed at, and just saying at 4% right now, if it stayed at 4%, across the board, would it not be better off to update that master plan slightly earlier? Just because it's identifying, the master plan is starting to identify some huge capital costs coming our way. And I feel like it's too bad that we didn't have maybe more of a handle on this even 6 years ago than what we do today. So just a question, is it more growth related that we should be updating faster versus just timeline?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Fidego. Generally speaking, you know, I don't know, I hazard to say the word normal growth or anything like that. Within Southern Ontario, where we're experiencing maybe a little bit more moderate growth, these types of plans are updated approximately every 10 years. But growth isn't always the trigger, which I think is important to understand. It's change. Growth means change, but our system could change as well, or the way we want to operate our system could change as well. And when there's a 20-year time horizon for managing this, you have to project out that far to understand the impacts of the decisions you're making. At 4% growth, I'd argue we want to be looking at probably doing at least, we're probably on that major upgrade cycle of 10 years, but we probably need to introduce an interim update, which is that 2029, 2030 timeline I had spoken about, because you need to check in to make sure that your assumptions are still correct in your system, because the other side of this too, as I said, we're going to see, and Mr. Tooth may not agree with me, but I think we're going to see an increase in water usage over the years, or we might see an increase in leakage. So understanding that implication is important, because if we're seeing that, we want to make sure we revisit it. So the idea is how quickly are things changing? And right now for the town of Cochrane, the biggest change that's happening is population growth. So at 4% every 5 years is a good idea to look at it again, and then every 10 years for a very significant update.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think sometimes, I mean, obviously there are different people sitting in chairs, council changes, admin people change, but I think kind of highlighting that this should be looked at on a 5-year, even if it's just to make sure that we're on the right path, it just starts to flag it a heck of a lot earlier, rather than waiting till all of a sudden you find out you have, you know, $800 million in projects that you all of a sudden can't afford to pay for. So I think it's important that we highlight that for the public.
Councillor Singh.
Good evening, and thank you for the presentation and congratulations on your new role. I noticed the technical analysis was initiated in 2023 and substantially completed in 24, with the final version being presented in 2026. After incorporating additional studies and feedback, could you help Council understand what factor contribute to the timing of bringing this forward now, and what value were added through the additional work completed over the past 2 years?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Singh. It's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. I think, you're going to hear me say this a lot in the next presentation, but staffing resources, considering what we have on our plates to deliver. Long-range planning is not something that exists on its own within the town of Cochrane, where it does in some other municipalities. The long-range planning has been managed by both utilities and by engineering over the last few years. There was a significant capital spend in 2025, I believe, that delayed our capacity to complete this. And I believe my role had a temporary departure in which the Director of Utilities had to take over this project for an extended period of time, on top of his many other responsibilities. So we were able to get this over the finish line late last year. We were dealing with some additional comments as well, but largely this is a capacity conversation. I think in the future, when we do perform these updates, this will be a higher priority for us, meaning that if we don't increase our capacity, some projects may not be, other projects may not be able to be delivered at the same time.
Okay, thank you. To follow up on that, the report identified certain infrastructure components as having capacity constraints or requiring upgrades to maintain service levels. How will administration prioritize projects that are considered more urgent or in greater need? Will there be a formal prioritization framework to ensure the highest risk infrastructure is addressed first?
Thank you. This is another very good question. I would say that we've already initiated some of these. So public safety is by far the biggest concern for the engineering department and for utilities. So the fire flow improvements in the main pressure zone reservoir was a project that was initiated even though we hadn't formally adopted the utility master plan. We had known about these last year, so we're undertaking that work right now. In addition, we need to look at expanding reservoir capacity in one of our other communities as well. So for us, certainly we don't have that framework right now for that decision making. It's something we're looking at doing, but we had enough items in here regarding community safety that we were mainly focused on those items first.
And one last final would be looking ahead. Are there opportunities to streamline future master plan updates so that the technical studies can move more efficiently from completion to council consideration while still ensuring they incorporate the most current information?
Another great question, Councillor Singh. Thank you. I would say that what we're doing is looking at bringing in a certain amount of expertise in-house within the engineering department. So certainly we want to have someone that, there's not a lot of people within my department that have done this type of, we do models for this, we build models for the water and wastewater system. I don't have a lot of people in my department that have built those models before. I think I'm the only one, maybe I have, forgive me, but there's another individual in utilities that has done it as well. Having that kind of decision-making in-house and understanding those types of things will help move this more quickly, and dedicating the resource. So in the future, as opposed to being a additional project on a director's plate, we plan to dedicate a resource to delivering this at that time and making sure that it's probably very likely going to be their top priority at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'll wait my further question for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to add on this item and the next one, I think we need to be careful how we use the word mandatory. It already came up in our conversation here. There are very few times in which council's actions are actually mandatory, and the use of the word mandatory actually suggests a fettering of the will of council. And I would add that on the next agenda item, the group that approves the agenda actually renamed the agenda item to essential or critical capital projects. So I'm not sure how it became repositioned as mandatory on this agenda. I don't know if that was overridden or miscommunicated, but I think we need to be careful on this item and the next one about positioning these things as mandatory. Does anybody else have any further comments? Call the question, all in favor? Carried. That brings us up to our next agenda item. Critical capital projects. Again, Mr. Sula.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of council and the public. Myself and Mr. Loden will be presenting on this topic around the capital projects. So we'll just start this one with a little bit of agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. So what we're going to be talking about is the fact that the town of Cochrane right now is on a bit of a tipping point where we need to make significant investments in the next 8 to 10 years that will sustain both our existing service delivery and the reliability, as well as our growth for the next few decades. We thought it was important to bring this update to you now for discussion. So what we're going to be talking about is a little bit of history on our capital budget spend, the current projects that are on this list, which are listed there on the screen, projected capital spend, which includes these and our base and the base spend that we do each year. And then Mr. Loden is going to be speaking about, our manager of finance is going to be speaking about debt limits reserve, funding sources, bit of grant opportunities, and then I'll be closing with other revenue considerations as well as the growth implications of this. So as you can see on the screen here right now, again, hopefully it's a little bit big, so maybe you can read it. So right now on the bottom there, I'm just showing our capital expend from the years 2020 to 2026. So right now, the yellowish line is the budget that was set each year, approved by council, and the blue line that's below that is the spend that was completed in that year. You can see that most years we are underspending, save 2022. In 2022, we had an additional project manager that was brought on, and that was for the protective services building that was built that year, which was outside of the capital projects team. The up and down cadence that you can see of the capital spend, where you can see it goes up one year and goes down another year, relates to years where considerable design, the lower spend years is where considerable design was undertaken, and subsequent years where spending goes up is where the construction spend occurs, which are typically much larger. Typically design spend is about 10 to 20% of the actual construction costs. This is to illustrate not only our historical spend, but our current capacity to deliver, which is constrained to approximately 25 to 35 million a year annually, depending on the types of projects we're delivering. So the list of projects we're going to be talking about here this evening are the existing water treatment plant expansion, the new water treatment plant, the water network upgrades, and that go along with the water treatment plants and the wastewater force main. So the existing water treatment plant expansion is expected to be starting this year, which we will have to have completed by 2028, as we need to expand our supply capacity. The existing capacity of the water treatment plant is approximately 15 megaliters a day, maybe just a little bit shy of that. We're currently operating at that capacity. Now, I think what's important to point out about a water treatment plant is it's much like I'll make the analogy to a race car engine. You can over rev a race car engine safely a few times, and if you do it regularly, you're going to blow that motor, basically. This is a similar type of situation we find ourselves in right now. Our operations team has been able to over rev when needed, but it's not something that's sustainable in the long term. The expanded capacity of the water treatment plant would bring us to 22.3 megaliters per day, which would service a population of approximately 50,000 people, depending on usage and depending on leakage, as I had noted in the previous presentation. To meet the timelines of 2028, we'll be required to use an alternative delivery approach to achieve this. which will be a large strain not only on our capital projects team, but also on our operations team, as it compresses the decision-making into a shorter period of time. We'll be coming back to council this fall regarding this, including a borrowing bylaw for this project. Specifically, I want to note that what you're seeing on the screen here is capital costs only. Asset management costs, staffing costs needed for both, for these, both in building and maintaining them, have not been included in this. So I think the important things to note from the risk, you've already heard me say it, we have a tight schedule. Our existing water plant, I neglected to mention, I apologize, our existing water plant cannot be taken offline. So in many water plants we have across North America or across the world, we have something called a clear well, which is a large amount of storage that you have at your plant that allows you to take your plant offline from time to time. It's not something we have at our existing plant, meaning that our plant supplies and then we pump it into the system. We call that a direct feed plant. There's many other ways of putting that. The tight schedule is leading us to the fact that what we're going to have to do for construction at the water plant is take the clarifier offline. And the clarifier, the way our water plant works is it's largely a filtration system. So when we pull in water from the river, we add chemical, we settle most of the debris in a clarifier, we scrape that out, and then we put it through filters. There's only a certain time of the year, typically January to March, within that window that we're actually able to run the river water straight through the filters, meaning the Bow River water is clean enough, I shouldn't say so clean, it's clean enough that we do not have to do the effort of dropping material out through clarifying, is what we call that. So it's very important that we're able to do this during those times, which is leading us to the constraints in the time to deliver this. The estimated cost for this is 32 million, which is what it's currently carried in our offsite levy bylaw as, and the spend each year is shown there. The new water plant, so the existing water plant expansion will buy us enough time to plan and build the new water treatment plant, which is currently is in the stage of being sited at this time. It's anticipated that this would need to be online in approximately 2033, excuse me. The project is currently not in the offsite levy as there is considerable planning still required. And it's not possible for us to deliver this using our existing resources. As I noted, the plant expansion of the existing water plant would get us to a population of approximately 50,000 people. At our current growth rate of 4%, we would reach 57,000 people by 2035. At a growth rate of 3%, we would reach 52,000 by 2035. And at a growth rate of 2%, we would reach approximately 48,000 by 2035. And as I noted in the previous presentation, our current town boundary allows for a population of approximately up to just above 68,000 people. So within our existing, even if we did not expand our town boundary, this is something that would still be required. And even at a 2% growth rate, we would reach 50,000, we would cross 50,000 people in approximately 2038. Meaning that from a capacity standpoint alone, we would have to, the new water plant would need to be built somewhere between 2033 and 2038, unless we brought growth to much lower than that. In addition, I think what's important to point out about the existing water plant and the new water plant, I hazard to make this comparison, but I'm going to do it. It's very important to understand that relying on a single asset, such as our water plant, especially as we grow in population, becomes a reliability risk. This is something that, and it's not a simple comparison, but the situation the city of Calgary found themselves in was a redundancy conversation. The new water plant here not only adds capacity, but it adds redundancy to our system. I'm sure many of you are aware of the break that we had on one of the water mains that leaves our water treatment plant. We're also aware of other custom pipes that leave our plant. Operating that plant is very delicate right now, and I know our operations teams are very sensitive to that. This plant would allow them that ability that system reliability that we need to ensure for our residents as well. Okay, moving on to the water network upgrades, continuing the conversation of, oh, sorry, I should go back. Again, it's up on the screen and I know everybody can read it, but the estimated cost for the new water plant is 60 million. The biggest concerns for this obviously are stakeholder coordination and our internal capacity, and obviously, as I said, the offsite levy bylaw, it not being in there at this time. The water network upgrades, at an estimated cost of approximately 50 million, are required for a number of reasons. First, to reiterate what I had said previously, the idea of system redundancy. The second is to allow us operational flexibility between our two water plants. Finally, we'll need to consider growth areas as part of these network upgrades to ensure we do not face large uphill costs or struggle in servicing these areas in the future. As part of this, we intend to update our water master plan in 2028 to ensure that we get this planned out effectively and construct these concurrently with the new water plant so we can take advantage of it when it comes online in 2033 and experience system redundancy immediately. Again, much like the new water treatment plant, we do not have enough internal capacity at this time to deliver this. And again, not in the offsite levy bylaw at this time. Move on to the wastewater force main twinning. So currently the wastewater force main at this time has the capacity to service a population of somewhere between 42,000, around 42,000 to 48,000 people at this time. Once we expand our water plants, it would seem obvious as we're seeing demand and usage, we will have more wastewater as a result of that. Therefore, we expect that our wastewater line will need to be expanded somewhere between 2034 and 2035 at a cost of approximately 126 million. I should point out, though, that we are undertaking a number of phases in the meantime, which include improvements at Calling Horse Creek, as well as connections with Rocky View County as well. The complications with this project will be routing not only within the town, but also approvals within Rocky View County, as we're effectively operating as a third-party utility within Rocky View County, and then third-party utilities managing the alignment, working around those as well. Again, internal capacity being a challenge with this. There's considerable planning associated with this project. We also need to update our UMP for our sanitary to determine if we are happy to maintain one transfer station and understanding how our system will grow in the future as we get through to final design for this. I think I would point out that currently there's multiple phases associated with this project, and phase 1 and 2, what you're seeing is you're seeing the entire project and through 3 phases. It would get us to a servicing a population of 74 to 77,000 people. The wastewater line would need to be expanded as we approach 50 to 55,000 people. Again, not to repeat the population projections on you, but that's around the same time frame as the new water plant or immediately after the new water plant. We're looking at ways in which we can defer this project, both from a managing cost standpoint as well as managing internal capacity. And as many people are aware, we have a sewage lagoon that's located next to our transfer station. The intention is to use the storage in that sewage lagoon to help defer the timing for this project so that we have the capacity and the funds to deliver it. Speaking to cost timelines, so everything I had spoken to you, I've only spoken to you about 4 projects. The total cost of those 4 projects add up to approximately 268 million, as shown in red on the screen. As I noted earlier on, we have a base spend of approximately 35 to 45 million a year. That's to deliver every other project that we have in the community: transportation, parks, as well as stormwater and any other spend that we wanted to make, whether that be equipment as well. So you can see that that's over 9 years. We have a $268 million spend. Along the bottom is our base capital spend in blue. As I noted, this is in line with our current spend, with a planned increase of 5% per year to 2035. As I said, the project includes budget line includes all projects not listed as mandatory. Also, I should note, in the years of 2031 and 2032, you can see a significant raise in the budget at that time. We have included the construction of an expanded operations center, which will be critical to ensuring we continue to deliver on the operational needs of the community, including the infrastructure that we're building to service the community. Over 9 years, that totals a capital spend of $731 million. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Loden, our Manager of Finance, to talk through the financial portions of this presentation.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As we consider how to fund these projects presented this evening, along with our projected base capital, one financing mechanism available to the town is debt. This slide illustrates the town's debt capacity servicing limits from 2027 through to 2035. There are several ways these calculations can be modeled. However, the scenario presented here assumes debt financing for the water treatment plant expansion, the new water treatment plant, and the new operations center. The first section of the table shows the debt limit established under the Alberta regulation. The debt limit is calculated at 1.5 times the town's revenue, while the debt servicing limit is calculated at 25% of the revenue. Incurring debt beyond either of these thresholds would require approval from the Minister of Municipal Affairs. It is important to note that these provincial limits are intended to be a conservative guideline to flag municipalities that may be at increased risk if additional debt is undertaken. They don't, on their own, fully represent the town's financial health. Rather, they're one component of a broader assessment that should be considered alongside the town's consolidated financial statements and overall financial position. As shown on the table under this scenario, the town would exceed the provincial debt limit by 2032. In addition to the provincial regulations, Council adopted a debt strategy in 2006, which establishes an internal debt limit of 80% of the maximum provincial debt limit. When the water treatment plant expansion, new water treatment plant, and new operation centers are included in the analysis, the town would exceed this self-imposed limit beginning in 2030 by approximately $6 million. While the town would not be in breach of the Alberta's regulation debt limit until 2032, it would no longer be in compliance with its own debt policy starting 2 years earlier in 2030. Before discussing potential options to address this, I want to highlight that the town would remain in a strong position to service its debt obligations. This is demonstrated by the available debt servicing capacity shown towards the bottom of the table. Even though the town would exceed its internal debt limit, it would continue to have sufficient capacity to meet its principal and interest payments. The other important consideration is the operating impact of carrying debt. Debt financing requires annual principal and interest payments, which must be funded through the operating budget. As shown at the bottom of the table, debt financing for the water treatment plant expansion would require an estimated one-time tax increase of 4.67% in 2027 to fund the annual debt principal payments. In 2030, an additional one-time increase of approximately 7.85% would be required to support debt payments on the new water treatment plant, followed by a further one-time increase of approximately 8.47% in 2031 to fund the annual principal and interest payments of the new operation center. To avoid these large sudden tax rate increases, we would recommend a smooth approach to the tax impact of debt servicing. Rather than applying the 7.85 and 8.47 increases in a single year, we would look to spread them out. The 2030 increase over 2028 and 2029, and the 2031 increase over 2030 and 2031. This would reduce large year-over-year fluctuations that would also allow the town to invest these funds in the interim, helping to reduce tax rate increases in future years. These estimates illustrate the operating impacts of debt financing and underscore the importance of weighing both debt capacity and affordability when evaluating long-term capacity funding strategies. I'd also like to note that administration will look to bring forward a recommendation to council to adopt the Alberta regulation for debt, an approach we're seeing other municipalities take as well. We're confident that by incorporating some of these remaining infrastructure projects into the offset levy bylaw, the town will be able to collect additional funding and manage its debt within the Alberta regulation. Lastly, I'd like to note that these figures do not include the $9.7 million request for the Horse Creek Sports Park project. Should council wish to proceed with that project, it would impact the debt limit capacity and add an additional 1.64% increase to service the associated principal and interest payments. As we consider funding the remaining critical and projected base capital projects, another funding mechanism available to the town is to use reserves. Looking at the capital projects, including the water network upgrades, the wastewater force main twinning project, and portions of the operation center, water treatment plant expansion, and new water treatment plant, funding these through reserves would require annual tax rate increases ranging from about 1.2 to 4.1% each year between 2027 and 2035. With the increase trending upward the later years as larger critical projects come online, reaching just over 4% by 2034 and 2035. In addition, if the town wishes to continue delivering on similar base level investments as experienced in recent budget years, future reserve contributions would be required. Under this scenario, the additional tax rate increase would be higher in the near term, approximately 5.5% in 2027, before gradually declining to under 1% by 2034 and 2035. Combined, the total tax rate increase needed to fund both the critical and base capital through reserves would be approximately 8.3% in 2027, easing to roughly 6% through 2028 and 2030, and settling at 5% annually from 2031 through to 2035. It is important to note that these projections assume an annual investment return of 5% on reserve balances. Should these investment returns differ from these assumptions, the required reserve contribution and associated tax rate increase would need to be adjusted accordingly. This scenario demonstrates that while reserve funding can reduce reliance on debt and associated borrowing costs, it requires significant upfront contributions and ongoing annual funding commitments to ensure sufficient resources are available when the major capital infrastructure projects are ready to proceed. Building on the previous slide, this slide provides a summary of the combined estimated tax rate increases required each year. The critical and base capital tax rate increases are shown in blue, followed by the estimated tax rate increase required for debt servicing, shown in tan. The bottom row shows the total combined estimated tax rate increases required to deliver these projects. In 2027, the total combined estimated tax rate increase would be approximately 12.94%. This would decrease to 10.06% in 2028 and 9.93% in 2029. It would rise slightly to 10.23% in 2030, driven by the increased debt servicing requirements, before easing to 9.73% in 2031. From 2032 through to 2035, the estimated annual increase would level off to approximately 5% per year, once debt servicing for these projects had been factored in. It's important to note that these figures assume no growth in the town's assessment base over the year. When we factor in 3% growth, the combined estimated tax rate increase would be lower each year, approximately 12.7 in 2027, easing to 9.71 in 2028, 9.42 in 2029, and 9.56 in 2030, before dropping more noticeably to 8.97 in 2031 and down to roughly 4% per year from 2032 through to 2035. Under a 4% growth, the impact is even more favorable, approximately 12.62 in 2027, decreasing to 9.6 in 2028, 9.26 in 2029, and 9.36 in 2030. Then 8.75 in 2031, before falling further to under 4% annually from 2032 onward, ending at approximately 3.51% in 2035. I would like to highlight that these figures relate only to the capital funding needed to deliver these infrastructure projects. They do not reflect the ongoing increases to town expenses over each year due to inflation and the cost of maintaining existing service levels. Those operating increases, along with staffing requirements to maintain these projects, would come on top of what is shown here. Lastly, I'd like to note that once these major projects are fully funded, the reserve contributions built into these tax increases would be utilized for the other community priorities and investments, or towards paying down debt more quickly. This slide provides an overview of the town's current offsite levy reserve balances as of the end of 2025. As council is aware, offsite levies are collected from developers to help fund the infrastructure required to support growth. These levies are allocated to specific infrastructure categories and can only be used for the eligible growth-related capital projects within these categories. Looking at the balances, the transportation levy currently has a positive balance of approximately 17.9 million, while the wastewater levy has a positive balance of approximately 13.7 million. These balances represent funding that is available to support future growth-related infrastructure investments. The water levy currently shows a deficit balance of approximately 13 million. The deficit is primarily the result of the River Heights Reservoir project, which was debt financed in advance of levy collections. As development occurs and additional levies are collected, those funds will be used to repay the associated debt for the project. Similarly, the facility levy shows a deficit balance of approximately $8.3 million, which is largely attributed to the RCMP facility. Like the River Heights Reservoir project, the project was constructed ahead of development and financed through debt, with future offset levy collection intended to recover these costs over time. The key takeaway from this slide is that while the water and facility reserve currently show a negative balance, these deficits are anticipated to reflect future growth-related infrastructure that has already been delivered to support the community. The associated debt is being recovered through future offsite levy collections and development proceeds. Overall, the offset levy program continues to be an important funding tool that allows the town to advance critical infrastructure while ensuring that a portion of these costs are ultimately funded by future development. As always, the town continues to actively pursue grant funding opportunities to help capital investment infrastructure. One of the primary funding sources is the Canadian Community Building Fund, or CCBF, a federal infrastructure program that allocates funding to municipalities on a per capita basis. In 2026, the town received approximately $2.2 million through this program, which will be transferred to the Build Community Strong Fund community stream moving forward. These funds can be used for a wide range of eligible capital projects, including local roads and bridges, public transit, sports and recreation infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure, and other community assets. The town also receives funding through Alberta Local Government Fiscal Framework, or LGFF, a provincial infrastructure program that funding is allocated as determined using 4 weighting factors: population at 65%, capital asset value at 15%, annual amortization expense at 10%, and kilometer roads at 10%. For 2026, the town received approximately $4.2 in LGFF capital funding. Eligible projects include local roads and bridges, public transit vehicles and facilities, emergency services, facilities and equipment, water and wastewater infrastructure, solid waste facilities, and municipal buildings such as recreation centers, libraries, cultural facilities, and community centers. Another funding source that has been recently announced is the Build Community Strong Fund, or BCSF. This is a new federal infrastructure program administered by Prairies Economics Development Canada that supports community infrastructure projects across the Prairie provinces. The program provides targeted, non-repayable funding to municipalities and nonprofit organizations. The intent is to strengthen community resilience and support regional economic development. Although the full details of the program have not yet been released, some of the key program parameters include federal infrastructure funding delivered through Prairie Scan for projects that provide economic, social, and environmental benefits to the broader community. The 2026 allocation through the community stream is $2.2 million. This was previously through CCBF. Eligible projects include the construction of new community infrastructure, as well as expanded renovations, retrofits, climate adaptation, or replacement of existing infrastructure. Projects must be completed and available for public use by March 31st, 2030, and preference is given to shovel-ready projects, including those with completed design work, permits, environmental assessments, confirmed funding plans, and reliable cost estimates. As the program has only recently been introduced, administration will continue to monitor developments, assess eligible requirements, and identify opportunities where town projects may align with program objectives and funding criteria. I will now pass it back to Adam to discuss other revenues and considerations along with growth implications.
Thank you. I think what's important to point out about what Robbie was just speaking about is what you're looking at is worst case scenarios. We're still collecting offsite levies, but obviously there's a number of costs that we're facing immediately, and we'll speak about some of that here. So around the idea of other revenue and considerations, some other thoughts on this is around the other revenue, there are opportunities that are currently being explored around servicing other communities surrounding Cochrane as a method to offset costs. These are discussions that are ongoing with Rocky View County, but it could be initiated with others, as well as the idea of increasing utility rates to offset some of these costs as well, which was not explored as part part of this presentation, but could be as part of future discussions. Other considerations of this that Robbie mentioned and I had mentioned previously is the idea of operating costs of expanded infrastructure, as well as managing asset renewal and taking that into consideration with long-term financial planning. And then finally, the idea of advocacy. It's very clear, as you can see through a number of these projects, that there will be support needed by both the provincial and federal governments, and that's a conversation that should be had and should be undertaken. We do believe that through things like the BCSF funding, there will be other opportunities for increased funding from other levels of government. As well as in past conversations, we've done this successfully, is the idea of having developer-led infrastructure. So some of our infrastructure has been delivered previously by developers, we've also partnered with developers in terms of those discussions with both the province and with the federal government. As well as Robbie had mentioned, the idea of those investment opportunities as well, if we're taking in those reserves to try and increase returns on this. Okay. Speaking to the idea of growth implications, maybe that's, so the budget that you've seen here today is about supporting both redundancy and a population that could eventually reach 100,000. The idea with these improvements is to do that. The population in 2035 will be approximately 60,000. If we have a lower growth rate, it will be somewhere between that 52,000 and 60,000 people. Offsite levy funding will come concurrently, and you can see this from the debt we have within our water infrastructure right now. While not every project is in the offsite levies, the growth, the offsite levy collection will offset these future costs. And as I said, we're showing a worst case scenario today. With growth, we will offset those costs with offsite levies as well. And then in the future, the collection of those offsite levies through growth will help us offset those debt costs as well. So what that means is certainly we could stop growth today. We could freeze, we could try that, and that would defer a lot of these costs. It's very challenging. I think one thing to point out is with our currently approved development plan, our neighborhood plans, with our currently approved neighborhood plans, it would already bring us north of 50,000 people today with what we already have approved, even if we didn't approve anything else beyond today. As well. So it's important to understand that, as well as the staffing requirements to deliver and run these facilities. So with that, I will hand it over for questions. Thank you.
All right, Council. Start with Councillor Fideko. Can I get a motion to start the conversation?
Yeah. So I'll approve option 1, that Council receive the critical capital projects long-term infrastructure planning report for information. I just want to put this out in the public to start before I actually ask any questions. So in 2027, in the budget that's going to come forward this fall, we're talking about 12.94% just in capital costs, correct? So I just want the public to be able to marinate on this. Like, we aren't talking about staffing, inflation, anything else. So what kind of projected budget are we looking at? 15, 16% essentially in combination? I want the public to really understand what this is looking like.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, through the mayor to Councillor Fideko, I think was very important what Mayor Nagel said at the beginning of the conversation. These are all decisions that are made by council, so like we could project. We are showing you a situation in which if we were to continue funding these, that's the path we would need to be on. So the water treatment plant expansion, council will have the ability to make that decision coming early fall around a borrowing bylaw. That will be factored into that as well. And the contributions to reserves would be a council decision. So yes, as is shown on the screen, it was 12%. I think over the past few years, we've had tax increases of anywhere between 3+%. So you can add that up and you could be at 15 if council were to decide to proceed.
Yeah, I realize that obviously we're not approving budget today, but it is very, very important that the public actually understands like that is what is possibly ahead of them, depending on council's decision. So I just wanted to flag it for right now.
Councillor, or Mr. Hyman, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that council, you felt it was important to bring this forward, so there is that public conversation on this, and certainly this is just a starting point of the conversation, and based on the direction that council gives us, you know, we can go away, do some additional work on this, but to get to the exact number today would be a bit premature. But as Mr. Sulo and Mr. Loden shared, that is in the territory if it was to be exactly as presented.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I had just a couple, maybe three tough questions. They're not challenges. I appreciate your team's leadership in addressing the system redundancy and flexibility to avoid Calgary-like utilities failures, as you mentioned, and everything you've done on this topic, Adam. Thank you. So it says in the package here, these investments total $268 million over a span of 9 years. Could you talk about some of our plans to fund these through levies to new or future residents? How does this tie in with the borrowing bylaw you spoke of in your presentation? That might be more of a Robbie question. But.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, and I'll hand this over to Robbie right after. Within the offsite levy bylaw, the existing water treatment plant expansion is funded through the offsite levies to about 77% of that cost, to the 32 million. The trouble is not so much that the offsite levies won't pay for a good chunk of it. The problem is when we collect those. I think that's the challenge we face, is that a lot of the investments that we're talking about today, to have that growth or to manage that growth, you have to make the investments early on to then sustain that after. I think one thing that I neglected to mention in there as well, and it's a really important point, we find ourselves in the situation where we have to expand this plant quite rapidly. Whereas if I were to go back 5 years, I would have told you, if I was here, I would have told you to start building another plant then, because we could have deferred the plant expansion for an extended period of time by building that new plant at a much lower cost. Robbie, did you have anything to add onto that?
Just
yeah, please.
Yeah, just building off of Mr. Sulo's comment there, through the chair to Councillor Wilson, we'd definitely be looking, even just using the existing water treatment plant expansion as an example, we'd be looking to use a combination of debt and offset levies to fund that. Like Mr. Sulo had indicated, a portion of that would be offset levy funded. However, we just don't have those funds available right now, so we would need to first take a debenture out to initiate that work, and then we would collect that back through offset levies over time.
Okay, thank you. The main question on my mind as I listen to this is, I'm trying to imagine a resident watching the video stream right now, and I'd imagine them asking something like, how would you respond to a resident watching that they thought new growth should be paying for these projects rather than placing them on the municipal credit card and raising taxes to pay principal and interest payments? I believe I just heard that 77% will be paid through OSLs. I believe that would leave 23% that the resident might be asking, why am I funding these? I can maybe think of one answer myself, which is we are increasing system redundancy and flexibility, which is a benefit to a current resident. Is that the basis for the other 23%, or how would we answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, it's a bit of, not to get into the complications of the calculations, I don't have it right in front of me, but the idea is that what portion of that is related to the growth costs, and then what portion of that is related to the redundancy or the improvements to equipment that might be at end of its life, so as well. So typically when the new water plant is I wouldn't want to get into that calculation, but that's largely would be growth driven, whereas in this scenario we're replacing a lot of assets that we are used up, if you will, and those are our costs. Yeah.
Okay, so there is some life cycle involved, not just
Yes.
expanding for growth's sake. Okay, and then my final question here is the project spending, from the package here, the project spending associated with both the new water treatment plant and the existing water treatment plant expansion alone will bring the town to exceed its self-imposed debt limit by 2030, which is what I think I guessed on the last presentation. So when we've talked about this in strategic planning, I have brought up, and I'm thankful that council and administration seems receptive to it, about exploring MCCs, which is a municipally controlled corporation here. And the reason I'm interested in that is principally because that, I think, is a mechanism to offload a bunch of this debt limit that's looming by 2030 and 2032 if council decides to reject our own self-imposed limit. So either way, we have a debt ceiling looming. And I guess not just to offload some of that debt, but also to, I think, streamline our expenses. Operationally, I think a MCC should be something we can be exploring. If we were to go down that route, this may just be a general administrative question. Do we think we could execute a municipally controlled corporation formation in time to avoid this debt ceiling by either 2030 or 2032? This might be too big of a question for our presenters.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I would ask, would Mr. Hyman would like to answer this?
Sure. I think as we discussed, the strategic planning, getting a MCC prepared would take 18 to 24 months. So we're looking at something that would be very tight to make that timeframe. There's other factors to consider in that as well, but certainly time is of the essence.
Okay, I appreciate that. The main reason I bring this to the attention of our public session here is that you just said somewhere in the 2-year horizon puts us almost at our 2030 first limit. So it's just something that I think that council needs to be aware of. It's a pending problem. It can't be deferred much longer in my estimation, and I'm glad we're looking into it immediately and not down the road.
And if I can, Councillor Wilson, the only other thing I would say, and certainly Mr. Loudon through his presentation, I think council should also be looking at the MGA debt limit, not only the self-imposed. I think that's another tool that's available in fast-growing municipalities throughout Alberta, and then certainly the mayor with the Minister Williams and the new task force that he's establishing for infrastructure would be something for us to explore as well. So we want to explore all the tools available to us.
I appreciate that, and I think it might be fair to insert here into this part of the conversation that this isn't necessarily Cochrane with a unique spending problem. This is something that any municipality that's been growing at whatever breakneck percentage we've been averaging for 15 years is experiencing, bumping up against their debt limit. I have no doubt that Airdrie and all kinds of other communities are in the same sort of position, and so I'm not necessarily criticizing us for being completely inappropriate with our spending. It's just simply a reality. If we're building projects of this magnitude, there's a debt limit that we're going to hit, whether we like it or not, and so I'm glad we're talking about it right now today.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. So we have to do something to expand our water treatment capacity because the current facilities expansion plan does not fulfill the needs of development that's already approved for Cochrane. That's what we heard tonight, right?
Yep, through Mayor Nagel to Councillor McDonald. Yes, that's correct. So currently I don't know the exact number, but I know that our approvals would put us above 50,000 people, and within our town boundary, we were able to expand well beyond the capacity of what we could expand our existing plant to.
Right. So I'm reiterating that for the public. There is an option to expand our existing plant, but that expansion is capped at 50,000 people, and we already have development approved that we cannot pull back on that will exceed that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so it's looking at that expansion project, tell us about if there's any ways to change that expansion project to create redundancies within it, do this. So we're looking at kind of I picture the new water treatment plant as the ultimate solution, the dream solution. Is there a scaled back version that brings us more comfort and is maybe more reasonable from a budget lens?
Yep. Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. So I would say that we're very challenged to provide that redundancy within the existing plant without taking it down for an extended period of time, which is actually as a result the problem here. The preferred solution for this, I think it's hard. I wouldn't think of the new plant as necessarily the dream solution. I would say that the new plant could have been the alternative solution to spending the money on the expansion to the plant. If we would have spent the money, you're seeing 60 million in today's dollars. Construction costs have risen rapidly, not just in the last 6 years, but have risen rapidly in the past 20 years. If we would have made this investment 5 to 10 years ago, it would have been lower. I can't tell you the exact number of what that would have been, but I know it would have been lower. And then we could have deferred the significant improvements to our existing plant, meaning that we could have deferred this $32 million bill. It could have been lower just to fix the operational items at the plant. The struggle we have in the existing water plant, as I said, is that we can't take it down for an extended period of time to address key issues. So for example, in the very small clear well we have a baffle curtain. And the idea of that baffle curtain is gives the water enough time to have contact with chlorine so it maintains, so it's just about that travel time through it. We actually have tears, small tears in that. It's just a plastic curtain. The problem is to go in there and do that replacement while it's live, you have to use divers. it's dark down there, it's very complicated to do. It'd be very nice if we could take that offline, it would take no time. We can't do that because we have to keep that plant running because if it's a direct feed plant. So there's not a whole lot of ways for us to improve redundancy with a single plant with the way that plant is designed right now.
And so planning for the new water treatment plant and scaling it to 100,000 for our population, that decision's based on our water license? Is that how you guys decided on that capacity?
Thank you, it's another good question. So I think the idea is when we build the water plant, it's not that it will immediately be able to service 100,000 people. The intention is we'll come to a conclusion about what's the appropriate spend at that time. The things that we'll do to make sure that it can happen is, our existing plant has a problem. We'll have more land available to us to be able to expand the footprint of the building, to add an additional clarifier, or to make modifications to that plant. The intention is when we do that design, it may be more, we have to look at the cost effectiveness of the total production capacity of that plant at that time. So when I say it would get us to 100,000, the two plants combined will get us to 100,000, although it might not immediately meet that today, but the idea of, if you understand what I mean by economies of scale, about the spend on that construction project,
Yep.
you have to make right-sized decisions so that we can expand inexpensively in the future,
Sure.
basically. Yeah.
I appreciate all of that, and we have an obligation to provide clean water to our residents. But it does make me deeply uncomfortable in such a time of affordability crisis to be looking at these numbers. And I think it's going to be really, really important, I'm assuming for all of my colleagues here, that we kind of look back at admin and go, what else can we do? How else can we pay for this? What are our options? How can we make this as reasonable as possible? I was going to bring up Minister Williams' counsel on infrastructure financing. Do we know anything about that yet?
Through the chair to Councillor McDonald, it's really at the beginning of that process, and certainly we're going to be exploring that amongst the other tools that are available to us. And that was really the intent of this presentation, is to get this information in the public realm, and then get some feedback from council, and then certainly address and explore those options.
Right. I think one of my concerns too, above water, is that we're just talking about water tonight. This doesn't include all the other pressures Cochrane's facing, right? So this is a beginning point of what we're looking at in terms of what we're going to put on our residents, and then add the education tax that the province is now downloading at a significant rate. So my final question, I think, is, other than layers of government, which we've talked about a bit tonight, are there private partners? Are there other opportunities for how we can make this a little bit more, I don't want to say survivable for our residents, but, livable?
Yeah, it's a great question again. So I think, as I said through the presentation, obviously you had already highlighted other levels of government. I think partnering with other communities surrounding the area to see if there's ways to share some of these costs, but share servicing, of course. And then the final one is, certainly the development community is very interested in partnering to make sure that we're able to achieve these things. And that can be through, obviously, assisting in lobbying, but that can also be through assisting in delivery of these projects as well. And I know from my experience that the private sector could efficiently deliver some of these things. Some of them I may not ask them to deliver, but some of the other things that we have on our plate, we could partner with them on, as well as look for their help in offsetting some of this in the long term. That's speaking at a very high level.
Yep.
I wouldn't say that there's any commitments, but I know that they would be willing to have those conversations.
Okay, so the next time we talk about this, we will maybe have more detail on some of those options?
Yep. Councillor McDonald, I would say that, and Mr. Hyman said this accurately, this is about initiating the conversation.
Yep.
We've had conversations around the idea, we definitely need to update our offsite levy bylaw. We need to make sure that we're collecting appropriately for not just these projects, but other projects for the growth in the community. We also need to make sure that we're bringing up these conversations with those other counterparts as well. So there's a number of things that we could do to help defer some of these, and we're initiating that conversation tonight with the intention of having further conversations, as you're noting.
For sure, thank you. And I just want our residents to hear that the team is doing every possible bit of investigation to make sure this is handled as sensitively as possible due to affordability. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden.
Yes, thank you very much. And so, echoing my colleagues' comments, affordability crisis is real. It's across the nation. Cochrane is not unique in this situation, and you know, red numbers and $100 million numbers it's a scary time to look at things. But I do want to actually perhaps celebrate a different lens, in that one of the things I think a large number of us campaigned on was increased transparency and knowledge. And so I really do want to congratulate the team as a whole for being able to, for the first time in years, bring us these numbers so that council can be aware of what the cold hard truth is and be able to make decisions that are strategic and thoughtful and long-term. So while you know, these are some scary numbers and it's a shock to the system, the wins of today is, you know, we're starting to daylight this into the public realm. And I don't want to say that in any way that implies that council knew of this before, because this is an eye-opener, I think, for the whole team, what the reality of the situation is. This is not unique to Cochrane or poor planning. Every municipality, probably across the country, is dealing with this. This is certainly not unique to our region. And so, but by having these numbers, by being thoughtful and knowing what our core utilities needs are and forecasting those costs, it allows us to be strategic and to be, you know, to ask those questions to our team of how can we keep it affordable? How do we balance off what we need? We don't want to be in a situation where we can't provide clean water. We don't want to be in the situation of Calgary or to go through the situation where we went through a couple years ago. We need, in my mind, certainly, to make sure that we're you know, the expansion certainly makes sense to me. We need that both for primarily current residents and some future growth. So it's daunting for sure, but I think knowing the truth allows us to then, you know, work towards thoughtful solutions and to be strategic in that. It's, you know, whether we can, you know, whether we can raise our borrowing limit. I know the province is having this conversation for all the municipalities about this need, this hard cap is putting on everybody. To look at removing our own 80% limit, how do we approach it through tax levels? How do we approach it through offsite levies? Is there something we can do there? The borrowing strategies, the grants. I know certainly the federal government and the provincial governments across the country are leaning in, want to, you know, drive investment in Canada. So we're seeing grants at levels I haven't seen. And then the different opportunities for partnership across the region. So while it's daunting, I would rather know the truth and be able to plan for it and work with our residents. And coming from it, from my principles there of, you know, fiscal prudence, long-term sustainability, affordability, and transparency, this is the first step to all of those. So it's a daunting night, but I'm confident that the team is going to find a way to keep Cochrane a desirable, affordable place to live, but things might have to change a bit.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you. If you could please explain the existing water treatment plant expansion. Public is watching. What does it entails in there, like, and also with the water network upgrades and the water enforcement, just a high level in a simple language. I would appreciate that.
Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Singh, thank you for that question. So the existing water treatment plant, so our existing water treatment plant currently takes in water from the Bow River through 2 intakes, and then it goes into flocculation. So we add chemical to try and get all the dirt to clump together. We put it through a clarifier that mixes it, settles it, and we filter that again, and then we we disinfect that using UV disinfection. We then put it through something we called always forget the name of the filters, but we put it through filters that are like nanotubes that basically filter out the rest of it. and then we add chlorine and pump it out to people. So the expansion to the plant is basically that we need to add capacity to our ability to settle the dirt out in the first place, the material out in the first place. So we have to add more chemical dosing and flocculation to settle it out. We need to modify our clarifier to take that material out because it collects at the bottom of the clarifier. We then need to expand some other things on that side that with regards to settling. And then in addition to that, when we're done treating water, there's something called residuals. So residuals is basically the leftover material from the water treatment. It's all the stuff you remove. Right now, the way we manage that is we have a tank underground. They pull it out of the tank, put it in bags, for lack of a better way of getting into great detail. We take that to our transfer station and allow that to dry out and to drain into our lagoon, basically. And then once it's dry enough, we waste it. The reason we have to do that is because I forget, it's very high percentage water. It's in the 90% water, and if you took that to the landfill, you'd be paying very high dump fees, so we have to do that. So part of the upgrades is that system as well, to make sure that because as we increase the capacity of the water treatment plant, we also increase the amount of residuals and material we have to manage after the fact. So that's all the upgrades that have to be in the plant. The water network upgrades have to do with the idea of the interconnection between the north and the south side of Cochrane. So right now, the Bow River is a very big barrier in the middle of town. We currently have 2 crossings that go underneath the river on the west side of Highway 22, and then we have 1 water main that is on the old bridge, which is in the center part of Cochrane as well. Those connections right now are not enough in the long term, so we have to look at more interconnection. The new water plant, we're looking in this at putting it in the south. Part of these upgrades are to make that a bit more robust. The idea that either plant could supply the town of Cochrane in the short term as well as we have to look at understanding how the new water plant would supply to the south, and we have to reinforce, so the River Heights Reservoir that was just built would be reinforced from the new plant in the south, and then understanding the implications of growth in the future for that as well.
So my correct understanding, we don't have any reservoir in the already water treatment plant?
Yes, Councillor Singh, so that's correct. We do not, we have a small amount of, small clear well, so we do not have any storage at the existing water plant. The new water plant would include a significant amount of storage capacity at the plant, which would allow for operations to be able to take sections down the plant and still be able to supply water to the community. Also the reservoir layout. So I think what's important to understand about the town of Cochrane, and you're pointing it out, is the town of Cochrane was largely built by developers, planned and built by developers. And when developers plan and build infrastructure, they right-size that infrastructure for what they're building. They're not thinking about the long-term needs of the rest of the community. The way that the town of Cochrane is laid out make a lot of sense for there to be a single reservoir on the very high points of our community. So we have an advantage in Cochrane many people don't have in Alberta. We have a lot of grade, basically, meaning we have highs and lows. There's a large advantage to putting large storage reservoirs at very high points in our community and using that to feed the rest of the community. What that does is you have a dedicated feed line go to this reservoir, and then that reservoir could supply the community for days, basically. I'm not suggesting that these water network upgrades would do that, but those are considerations we have to have.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and for people, residents to understand, this water treatment, water plant, the expansion, it's critical, it's...
Yes.
Yeah. And we have only a limited time, like whatever, January to March and stuff.
Yes.
It's not that, yeah.
Sorry.
It's not that like we are growing and stuff, but it has to be done, whether we grow or no, that has to be done this year or so, whatever, like, put on stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Singh. Yes, the existing water plant, currently we're operating at or just above our capacity of the water plant, and we need to expand that as we are going to grow past that capacity on an annual basis, basically. Okay. So, yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to provide some comments before I go back around. I have a question. So if we build the expanded water treatment facility and then we have subdivision and development permit applications come forwards in areas where land use has been granted, but we don't have adequate water infrastructure to service those areas, what would happen at the subdivision and development permit stage of those approvals?
Thank you, Councillor Nagel. So just to clarify, The question is, if we had subdivision or applications and we did not have the capacity to service those applications?
Yeah, let's suppose we've built to 55,000 people. There's still undeveloped lands with land use. We think with our new and improved, upgraded water treatment facility, we can only accommodate about 55,000. And so now more people are coming forward looking for subdivision and development permit, but we don't have the water infrastructure in place. What would happen then? Would we simply reject the development permits?
We would state that we were unable to service those development permits. It's similar to how River Heights Reservoir was handled when we were realizing we were out of water storage capacity in South Cochrane.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure I understood that properly. So I've been listening to everything everybody's been saying. I've been writing down some thoughts as I go. I thought I'd read this to keep my thoughts somewhat concise. I can obviously get behind the idea of expanding our current wastewater treatment facility. There's some stuff in this plan that makes sense, but on the whole, this plan, as it is currently being discussed, really misses the mark for me. This past fall, the foundation of my election platform and the mandate that I was elected to fulfill was that Cochrane could not afford to continue growing the way that it has been over the past few years. And now here we are 8 months later, and we finally have some of the numbers before us to look at, and it seems that the numbers are showing that to be true. I work for the people who pay the taxes and voted to put me in here at the end of the day, and the bottom line is that those people have not given me a mandate to move forwards with a plan like this. We are talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and it will have significant impacts on people's taxes. This plan that we're discussing this evening is suggesting that council should support blowing through our debt limit and then ushering in years of massive tax increases. It has been positioned as mandatory, but that is an assertion that is based on the assumption of Cochrane growing to 100,000 people in the foreseeable future. The reality, however, is that is not a foregone conclusion. In order to grow to 100,000 people, we would actually have to annex a ton of land and approve probably 10 to 15 more neighborhoods, and those are decisions that this council does not have to make. That annexation and those hypothetical neighborhood approvals are not in any way mandatory, and so this infrastructure to support that growth, therefore, is not in any way mandatory. My major concern is that once we start moving forwards with these financial commitments, then that growth does become more essential because we will need that growth to pay for the debt that we have accumulated. And so we'd end up essentially maxing out the credit card, needing the growth to pay for those credit card bills. Now, with all that being said, I do think it's important that we plan for the future. This is a growing region, but what I think we should be doing is proving to the community that we have a grip on growth and implement tangible policy tools to pursue a slower growth target to slow down these financial pressures, and then and only then start planning for the future and taking on that debt. But in my position, we should not be doing that beforehand. If council chooses to move forward with this plan, unfortunately, it will not have my support, and I will find myself in a very precarious position where I'm the head of an organization that I fundamentally disagree with. Under my current understanding of the plan, it is extremely unlikely that I would support the future tax increases that are being discussed here this evening. And interestingly, I do believe that position is in line with the clear majority of Cochrane's residents and taxpayers. This proposed plan and strategy seems to me like it is a double whammy of bad news. We are talking about huge tax increases, but those tax increases aren't for something that people in this community, people in the community want. Normally, we raise taxes to enhance services or build new facilities for people that they're excited about. In this case, we're talking about taking on that debt to annex land in people's backyards so that we can turn Cochrane into a city of 100,000 people. I believe almost nobody in this community wants that, and we're asking the taxpayers to pay up. So for me, we need to go back to the drawing board and get serious about slowing down our population growth so that we can delay these financial pressures and plan this capital at a rate that Cochrane taxpayers and families can afford to keep up with. Thanks. And I will turn it over to Councillor Federico.
That's a hard one to follow. I actually have one question. Mr. Sula, you made a comment before about, had you been here 5 years ago, that, those projects could have been way less. Are the amounts that you're stating in this plan here today, is there built-in inflationary costs of what we could be seeing? Because if we're not talking about taking on construction until 27, 28, or 29, obviously we're talking a 3-year timeline difference. Are we envisioning that these costs could be even more than what we're hearing about today?
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Redeco, that's exactly correct. Everything you're seeing today is in 2026 dollars. So, and a number of councillors have pointed out that many communities in the region are facing the exact same challenges, meaning that everyone's facing similar types of costs, and when you have more people chasing less goods, prices would rise as a result of that, and we've seen that in the last several years. So these are in today's dollars. You will see an increase in that. I've had conversations with my counterparts at the City of Calgary. They're worried about the exact same problems. They're obviously on a different scale than us. They're actually thinking about, not us, they're thinking about Metro Vancouver and the demand for goods and services in Metro Vancouver with their growth, which I can tell you is going to be a growth pressure we're going to face as well. And while I can appreciate everyone is very excited about the idea of pursuing additional pipelines, I can tell you that absorbs construction capacity as well. It absorbs materials. These are all problems that we face, but every other community is facing similar problems.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate everybody's comments around the table. Councillor McDonald kind of nailed it, that I think we're going to need to find some very thoughtful solutions here. My worry, along with Mayor Nagels, is that I don't know any one person who wants to live in Cochrane of 100,000 people. That's never been something I've heard out in the public, that people are hoping that we grow to 100,000. I feel that this does push us to almost have to, if not promote growth, because if we're not promoting growth at that point, those tax rates are going up even further than that. I think that we do need to get a handle on our growth period, and I know 3% was talked. I'd even say tighten it up and go down to 2. We just need to get a control on all sorts of things here in town, because it's not just this. This is, like Councillor McDonald said, one small piece of the pie. We're just talking water, wastewater. We're not talking rec, libraries, amenities, all the other things that build out a full community. Frankly, the whole entire thing just makes me incredibly uneasy in a time where I know families who are struggling. People are worried about their jobs, let alone we're talking about perhaps, and I'm just stating this as not, this is what it's going to be, but perhaps a 16% tax increase on people. Yeah, I think we better become a whole lot creative and figure out a way to, I obviously realize you can't just say we're not doing it. That's not what I'm getting at. But we need to find a way to very much, I don't want to say push down the line in a negative way, but find a way to extend this out so that we get a handle on what the future looks like. And I wish that we had known about it 5 years ago myself, so that we could have probably did some different planning along the way.
Councillor Singh?
So I just want to understand, so we're not here to like say that we're gonna approve this or we're gonna do this thing. What I'm understanding is we also not gonna put a Band-Aid solution that we're gonna push it to 5 years down the road, because if it's cost 32 millions here, it's gonna cost like maybe $45 million, and whoever's sitting on this bench could be on the same boat. And this project, as admin is bringing up in there, that water treatment plant has to be done in there. We're not talking about anything upgrades, wastewater thing, but can we just focus on something which is more important, or are you guys gonna bring it back in end of the fall or something that it has to be done? I'm just trying to understand what is the best course.
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, I think what's important to say, this is for information only. There's no decisions being made here today. There's no intention for decisions being made here today. This is very much about that information. The only thing that is going to come to you that's in this report is, or in this presentation today, will be the borrowing bylaw for the existing water treatment plant this fall. There are some ongoing investigations which are approved in previous budgets, but they are all small costs that are enabling the investments in these other projects. The significant investment in these projects does not come for at least another year from now, where these conversations are ongoing. And I would point out again, the conversations around growth and what growth looks like could impact the timing for these as well. But again, things like the water plant and the wastewater line, it's to understand that when we cross 50,000 people, that's when these investments need to start being considered, and that's not too far around the corner.
So if I may, with the wastewater forming, so you're saying 50,000 is the max capacity for wastewater, or?
Yeah, so Councillor saying there's multiple phases to it. So right now, our capacity, we have to do a small amount of work. We have some improvements, which are some life cycling and some to tie in some surrounding communities, which will get us right now with using the lagoon. Based on current growth rates, we can defer that to around 2035, I believe is my presentation. Construction in 2034 to be online in 2035. If the growth rate backs off, or if we don't grow at all, sure, maybe it doesn't need to happen, but if our growth rate backs off to 2-3%, you could see that deferred a little bit later, but we are using lagoon capacity to try and defer that a little bit longer.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Any further conversation? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor to accept as information. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
One more item. Does anybody need a break before we go into that? Okay, let's take 12 minutes. Come back at 7:30.
Thank you.
All right, so let's reconvene this regular council meeting with a regular utility rate review, preliminary findings update from Director Sean Tooth and team.
Good evening, and thank you for having us, Mayor and Council. Before we begin, I want to briefly frame tonight's presentation. As Council will recall, this is our second dedicated visit regarding the town's utility rate review. In March, Council endorsed the guiding priorities for this work, including full cost recovery, revenue stability, resiliency and risk management, transparency, public understanding, conservation, and fairness and equity. Tonight's financial findings are not a new policy direction. They are a result of applying those principles to the town's utility system and financial analysis. It is also important to clarify what tonight is and is not about. We are not seeking discussion or direction on utility rates this evening. Tonight's presentation is focused on revenue requirements that underpin the utility system. That is, what it costs to operate, maintain, and renew the town's existing water, wastewater, and stormwater services. Administration intends to bring forward proposed rates in the fall as part of the budget process. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to share the preliminary financial findings that are emerging from that work, including revenue requirements, major cost drivers, capital funding pressures, and the path toward future rate design. This remains an information update to Council as administration continues refining the analysis. I also want to note that the revenue requirements presented tonight have been informed by asset management practices, including life cycle-based renewal planning and replacement cost assumptions. That gives us a more reliable foundation for understanding long-term utility needs, and we expect that work to become even stronger over time as the town continues to build its internal asset management capacity. I also want to underscore one important point at the outset. The revenue requirements discussed tonight are intended to support the operation, maintenance, and renewal of the town's existing water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, so we can sustain reliable service delivery over the long term. They are not intended to fund growth-related infrastructure. That distinction is important as Council considers the scale of pressures being presented this evening. With that context, I'll turn to our presenters from Urban Systems. You've already met Chris Nelson. So by way of brief reminder, Chris is a community consultant with Urban Systems who has supported the town of Cochrane on many initiatives over the past decade, including the utility rate reviews, cost of service work, and regional servicing matters with the City of Calgary. Joining Chris is Devin Cran, a consultant with Urban Systems who works with communities across Alberta and British Columbia on infrastructure strategy, rate setting, asset management, and long-term financial planning. Devin brings both municipal financial planning experience and prior federal public service experience to this work. I now invite Chris and Devin to take Council through the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Tooth. Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. Appreciate the opportunity to provide an update tonight on the utility rate review. Just a quick little agenda. Really, the focus is on the initial findings, but we wanted just to start off and reorientate everyone. I know it's been a few months since we've been here, just about the overall rate setting process that we're going through with the town, and then go through the initial findings and then talk about next steps as we get closer to the fall. So the bottom line up front, just I guess some things perhaps to hopefully leave with Council tonight and well into the future as we bring this work forward. You know, the capital needs side of things, there are some significant capital needs, and I don't think this to be new. Obviously, there's a presentation that just happened around some of those capital needs that the utility be related to. But there's some significant capital needs for utilities that over the next decade and beyond. And so this is really important when you're thinking about sustained service delivery and how you're going to meet those capital needs and really coming strategically with a plan to fund those long term. The number two key piece that we wanted to highlight is there's some significant operational impacts. A lot of this right now is being driven by the City of Calgary charges that are being proposed for the treatment and disposal of wastewater, and we'll go through that in the presentation tonight, but something also obviously to highlight as a key piece. And the last one in regards to approach, utilities require certainty around approach to financing and funding. And this is really talking to the strategic side of things. We're going to talk a lot about capital needs for the utilities over the years ahead, but coming up with a philosophy and an approach of how you're going to fund that long term is really important, and gives the utility, obviously your ratepayers, certainty around that, and also gives some certainty around sustained service delivery long term. That piece needs to fit into, though, the larger fiscal health of the community and the plan for that long term. The utilities are a big component of that, obviously. And the last one is, and Mr. Tooth highlighted this, but the town has invested a lot in the last number of years on asset management. We'll highlight a few of those pieces tonight, but continually investing in that and getting to understand your assets even further. There's a number of perhaps gaps, might be a heavy word, but areas of improvement that could occur within the utilities. And continually advancing that asset management work just gives you more certainty and understanding of when those assets need to be replaced, how to maintain them long term, et cetera. And so those are important pieces that we'll continue to highlight through the slide deck. But we always want to start with some key points here, obviously, to highlight, to take away from today's presentation. So rate setting process, the work that we're undertaking with the town, we're looking at the water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. Tonight, water and wastewater is going to be the focus of the presentation. Those are the lion's share of the utilities overall from a financial perspective. Not to diminish the stormwater side of things, it's very important, and we'll be bringing that forward in the future. We do have some recommendations, though, in regards to shifting around the utility approach with the stormwater. We'll highlight at the back end of the presentation. So again, to reorientate council, the rate setting process has kind of 5 key steps. The first one being setting up what the objectives are and priorities. When we came to council in March, we brought forward a number of these. Mr. Tooth highlighted those in his preamble. And so that's really a first key piece. What are we trying to achieve as a municipality, and how does that influence your utilities and how you try and achieve that long term? The second piece is in regards to revenue requirements. So this is really, what does it cost to run the utilities and to deliver the service you're trying to deliver to your residents, your businesses, day in, day out in the long term? And so we'll go through that. That's really the heart of the presentation today. Once you understand those revenue requirements, it's really how do you allocate those costs to different users within the system, and we'll highlight where that work is pointing us right now. And then to those customers, how do you actually charge them? What's the rates that they pay, and under what methodology and approach? And so that's your rate design. And so we'll highlight some of the recommended changes to your current rate design tonight. And then the rate setting and forecasting, this is kind of the next step when we bring all these pieces together. That is creating a visibility around where the rates are going and how those will be forecasted over time. And so again, that tries to set a framework around that for the next number of years, so you have a sense of where those are going and what that looks like. So we start with the priorities and principles. This is just a bit of a summary from the last presentation. I'll go really quickly, but feel free at the back end to ask any questions around this for sure. So really, your priorities, your objectives, we leaned on a number of planning documents the town has and policy work that you've done in the past, namely the municipal development plan, which pointed to a number of things which would inform how your utilities might want to be influenced by that work. And so we've identified some of these here, and these were shared again in March with council. But the notion of full cost accounting, the data-informed decision-making, maximizing infrastructure resiliency, service reliability, services and affordability, and water conservation, which the town has done a lot of work in. And Mr. Sulo actually highlighted in the previous presentation of how well Cochrane's done around that piece in regards to per capita water usage. So these are a number of things that influence the initial draft priorities or objectives that we came up with and brought to council in March and shared. So I'll just highlight them, but not go into great detail, but happy to talk about these at the back end. So it's really important that through the work that obviously the public has an understanding of how the rates are set and what informs the rates that they're paying, that there's transparency around that in the sense of how costs are allocated and what the utilities are doing to sustain service delivery long term. Full cost recovery in the sense that the utilities are paying for themselves, and that as ratepayers are paying for those services, those are covering the full cost of those utilities and delivery of those. The utilities have some revenue stability, that the rate design or rate structure, how you charge your customers, promotes conservation. That there's governance strategic alignment, so again, that's tying to your policies and different directions the community is trying to achieve. That there's resiliency and risk management and considerations, that's largely tied to asset management and thinking longer term. And the last one is that there's fairness and equity, and this talks largely to how costs are allocated within the system and who's putting those demands on the system. So these were the objectives, priorities that we came up with and shared with council in March, and are carrying forward now into how we're establishing the rate setting forecast into the future. Revenue requirements. So some of those priorities that really tie directly to revenue requirements, or at least top of mind for us. In regards to resiliency and risk management, this is really about being strategic. coming up with a plan to how you fund service delivery long-term. And that largely ties to capital and how you're thinking about replacement of capital long-term. Full cost recovery, so again, trying to recognize what are all the costs the utilities have within the municipality and how do we recover for those long-term, and we'll highlight a few spaces where the town's made some improvements through this rate setting process in this space. And then revenue stability, again, this largely speaks to forward thinking and getting ahead of any kind of major costs and understanding what the financing and funding strategy is from the utilities perspective for those. But it also speaks to how you set up your rates and making sure there is some stability built within them so that those costs that are fixed for the utilities are maintained over time. For revenue requirements, when we talk about revenue requirements, we're largely talking about 4 big buckets. There's the operations and maintenance costs. There's the municipal service payment, which would be a transfer from the utilities to the municipality for the services it receives to support the utilities. There's new capital and there's capital replacement or life cycle costs. And we'll go through each of these at a high level in the next few slides. So the first one on the water, this is for water, and we'll talk about wastewater on the next one, is the operations and maintenance costs. This is a graph visualizing what the projections are on those operations and maintenance costs over the next decade, plus or minus. The trend line for this is actually pretty consistent with what you've seen over the last, say, half a dozen or 5 years or so. And I'd say that's largely because in the last number of years, the town has amplified the budgets for operations and maintenance to make sure that the sustained service delivery becomes a reality long term. And so as you can see on the right-hand side, in the last 2017 to 2025, you've experienced about a 6% increase annually on your operations and maintenance costs. What we're projecting through some detailed work with the operations group, so this would be looking at, as you bring on new assets in the future, what are the staffing requirements to maintain those assets? What are some of those maintenance costs that you're starting to elevate within the system that you need to do over time, et cetera, and going through all of those lines row by row. And what's being projected right now is about a 5% increase on operation costs annually over that 10-year period. I want to highlight here that one of the key pieces when you see all these numbers, this is the revenue requirements, so the expenses of the utility increasing over time. But it doesn't mean it directly correlates to a rate increase of that rate. You're also going to be having new customers come online during this time that are using up some of the capacity in the system, obviously. So that would influence where the rates actually land. Today, we're just trying to provide a snapshot to council as to what we're seeing in the revenue requirements and how those grow over time. On the wastewater side, we have a little bit more complex graph here, and this is intended to create a little bit more visibility on the portion of the charge for water and wastewater that's attributed to the City of Calgary and the treatment of your wastewater and the disposal of that wastewater. So as council know, Town of Cochrane distributes their wastewater from the main transfer station in a pipe to the City of Calgary. City of Calgary receives that, it treats it, and then disposes it back into the river. What you're seeing here on this graph is the green line at the bottom would be showing where your operations and maintenance costs are for in-town operations and maintenance, so in the town of Cochrane. And then the trend line of that is pretty consistent with what we've seen historically for the town. Obviously, it's scaling as the system scales over time. The blue bars that you're seeing there between the green line and the brown line are representative of what you pay the City of Calgary to treat and dispose of the wastewater. And you can see disproportionately that is growing over time. And when we get to the back end in the 2035 range, it makes up about just over 2/3 of the overall cost within the system to customers in town of Cochrane would be the charged by the City of Calgary. Within that charge, there's a couple of components. The City of Calgary is charging you for all the capital improvements they need to do to treat and dispose of the waste, but also for the ongoing operations and maintenance to do that, for their staff to do that as well. And so, I think the key takeaway on this one is that right now, the costs that are being projected in the town of Cochrane right now is going through a study with the City of Calgary to project the next 4 years, which is the 2027 to 2030 timeframe. So we have really good purview or view on those numbers, and we've just extended that within the 10-year period. But the City of Calgary charges are disproportionately outpacing what it costs to operate your system within town. And so obviously it's something to be heavily aware of. You can see on the percentage on the side that it's about 11.4% increase annually on the operations and maintenance side, which includes that City of Calgary charge, and is about 75% of that increase on an annual basis. So pretty significant and impactful, but something obviously to be alive to. That's on operations and maintenance. Another piece of the work that we looked at that is part of the revenue requirements is what we call a municipal service payment. Again, this is what the utilities pays the municipality as a whole to provide services to the utilities. And so this, on the screen, you're seeing all the different service areas within the municipality that would perhaps provide services to the utilities at some point in time throughout a year. And so that might be human resources, it might be finance, et cetera. And so the town has gone through a pretty extensive exercise here, meeting with all of these different service areas and trying to understand what's the amount of effort that you put into supporting the utilities on an annual basis, and how much of those costs should be carried in the utility and given back to the municipality through this municipal service payment. And so this is work that's underway. This portion is completed where the meetings occurred with each of these different service areas. The key takeaway here is how the town was doing it before was applying a general percentage of those expenses that the water utility or wastewater utility was experiencing, but it wasn't necessarily representative of those services that were being provided. And so this is a much more detailed look at that, and it gets you to a more full cost accounting perspective and understanding of what those services are. There's some more work to be done in this space around the spaces that utilities are occupying and how they should be paying for those. So some things in the years ahead to still be thinking about. But this gets you into a much stronger position to understand what those services are and how you fully cost account for the utilities and the services that they need to operate day in, day out. The last piece in the revenue requirements that we've explored is the amount of funding needs that are required for capital. And this is just a visual trying to capture all of the different assets that the utilities from a water wastewater perspective manage on a annual basis. And so obviously there's the water treatment plant, there's a number of reservoirs, there's many hydrants, pump stations, and then about 174 kilometers of distribution mains that have within it 4,300 assets, valves, et cetera, within those mains. And all of that is required to get the water from the plant, from the river, to each individual unit home within the community. Beyond then it leaves the house, obviously after it's been utilized, and it goes through an extensive collection system that goes to lift stations, which then gets moved to your transfer station, which then moves that waste onto the city of Calgary for treatment and disposal. And so, the visual here is just trying to emphasize that there's a lot of assets to be thinking about and a lot of things to be thinking about maintaining and replacing over time. And so that's critically important to have a sustained service delivery and to have an approach to how you would fund that ultimately as those things start to expire and need to be replaced in the long run. On the left side here, we're trying to emphasize, I'm just going to drink water. Emphasize for those assets that understanding of those assets, understanding what the needs are, what the replacement costs might be of those, and when their expiry is, or perhaps at different times, or different level of understanding. And so some of the assets that were even talked about tonight would be ones that are within your 10-year capital plan and are being thought about, and additional reports and studies are being done or identified in master plans to be completed in some closer duration. And so there's a little bit higher understanding perhaps around those projects and where they're at. Some other assets, you might have done some asset management assessments, which looks at the condition and the consequence of failure and those kind of things. And so there'd be, again, a higher understanding of what those assets are. And you've done this work for your vertical assets, your lift stations, your pump stations across the town, which is really valuable work. Some other assets you may have looked at replacement forecasts. So these assets cost this much to replace today in today's dollars. We just did one, for example, in this community. Let's apply that now across all those assets that we have within the town. So it's not perfect, but it gets you a better understanding of what the replacement costs might be for those assets. In other circumstances, you might just have historical financial records as your basis of understanding. And so this would be called tangible capital assets, is the reference to that. And so to identify an asset you have, what you paid for in 1980 to build that asset, and how much that asset's depreciating over time. I think as we'd all appreciate, that would be a pretty low level of information around asset, given that it's 30 years later, 40 years later, and the cost would have changed dramatically. And it's just a financial record opposed to an asset understanding record. So the key point here is that you'll have different sources of information coming into a utility rate process that you're leaning on to understand what your capital need is. And some of those pieces of information are going to be much higher quality and give you more certainty than others. And the key takeaway here is continually trying to move on that spectrum of higher certainty and understanding through your asset management program and work. And so this is a key aspect when we do utility rate reviews, is just understanding what are the sources of information that we're inputting into the long-term modeling, so we have a good understanding of that information. To give an example of this, so the laterals, and these are smaller pipes that go from your service mains into people's houses. They connect the water and then take the sewer back into the collection system from individual units within the community. And so you have approximately 12,500 laterals within the community, so not insignificant, a significant amount of assets. When we looked at your tangible capital asset information, the financial records over history, what we found was that showed us you had 8,200 services. It showed that the approximate depreciation of those assets per year was about $150,000 per year. We inflated it to 300 based on some rule of thumb adjustments. When we actually looked into the data set, so we went through your GIS system, we found where there was gaps and it wasn't showing where laterals would be, where there's houses that should have been, that are connected, we know that, it's just extrapolating that information. The number of connections actually went to 12,500, so there was a gap of about 4,000 assets there that weren't being identified. And then when we take that and we look at what you've replaced some of these assets currently in the last couple of years and what it costs to do that, and we take that across all of the assets, it worked out to about $820,000 per year of depreciation you should be putting away to replace those assets over time. So you can just see the discrepancy there between historical financial records. And again, the TCA isn't intended to be an asset management source. It's intended to be a financial record at a point in time. But in lieu of not having better information, sometimes that's what you have to lean on. So by going through the asset replacement for the laterals, you can see that delta and how significant that can be. And so there's some other pieces or other assets right now in the community that you have to lean on the tangible capital asset information, which won't be as strong. And so continually involving your asset management programming and continually doing that work is just going to make the utility stronger overall, but make your rates and your forecasting that much stronger in the long term. The other thing to point out here is that when we go through this work, there's going to be assets that have expired but haven't been replaced yet. And that's great. Obviously, you can make assets last as long as they can, but it also represents that you have some assets sitting out there that could expire at any time. And knowing what that cost is important. So in this case, it's about $2 million for the laterals, or about 4% of the overall asset value that's out in the community. And again, that could be extrapolated for other assets that we didn't look at through this lens at this point. So once you understand your funding need, I think the next critical question is what's the philosophy to actually pay for this over time? How best do you do that? And there's really three key sources to fund your utility and your capital funding. There's grants, and receiving those perhaps on an annual basis, or if it's project-specific grants, it would be another avenue under the grant category. There's utility reserves, so this would be the cash that you have within your reserves that you're making contributions to on an annual basis, so your transfers to capital. And then there'd be debt, so taking out debt and then having the utility on an annual basis pay the principal and interest payments on that debt. And so there's times when some of these mechanisms, these funding sources, make more sense than others. For reserves, there's opportunity there for large life cycle replacements to be planning ahead and getting ahead of that. Obviously, if you're not planning ahead of that and they show up, then you won't have enough in the reserves. That's pretty problematic. But when you're thinking about those long term and you're able to smooth out rates and put some money away to reserves to be contributing to those larger assets, that's important. Reserves are also really effective for those routine annual contributions. So you're doing a street improvement, you're replacing the sewer and the water and the storm line at the same time. And so those will be things that the town of Cochrane now will be doing every year, every couple of years. Those are pretty routine, and reserves are a really good resource to fund those. From a debt perspective, debt's really effective when you have major investments. So that is on a water treatment plant, things that show up less frequently and that are significant scale. By using debt allows you to smooth out those implications to ratepayers, and then you can pay it over time. And then generations of ratepayers, so those that are using the utilities today, are paying for that service delivery, but also those in the future that benefit from it are also paying for that, again, depending on how far out you you amortize that. And this allows you to limit rate spikes. You know, obviously if a major investment is done in 1 year and you're trying to do that from cash today, that can be really impactful to your ratepayers. And so there's a balance here. And so what we're trying to do through this work, working with administration, is come up with a philosophy around how the utilities can fund infrastructure long-term so that they have some certainty around what those funding sources look like. And then that can feed into your fiscal health, overall, your fiscal plan for the community. And then there's some certainty around what that looks like for all the different groups. The colors aren't showing up great here. They're showing up really good on my screen in front of me, so I apologize for that. But this is trying to communicate what that philosophy looks like. And this is for water. This is a 10-year outlook for annual average contributions to deal with capital funding. And so the top row shows those three different main sources, so grants, utility reserves, and debt. And then on the far left side, going up and down, it identifies the different categories that we're thinking about and talking about. So the assumed approach that we're utilizing right now in some of the modeling that we're figuring out to figure out the revenue requirements, we're assuming that you're going to utilize some of your annual grants to pay for asset renewal within the community. And so what we've looked at is you have a group of assets that we're determining how much they're depreciating every year, how much it would cost to replace those as they show up. And then we're assuming that 20% of those assets would be funded by grants on an annual basis. And so that works out to be about $600,000 a year that we're assuming grants are coming in to help fund water assets over time. And so over the 10-year period, it's about $6 million, just over $6 million that would be funded through grants. And that's covering assets like your water mains, some water laterals that are expiring, water hydrants that need to be replaced, or water valves and all those things along your lines. The other 80% of that we're assuming is coming out of your utility reserves. So you're putting enough away every year, enough away every year to be covering assets like those replacements. So 80% of that is being done through your reserves. For the capital plan projects, so then those are over the next 10 years, a number of them were talked about today. Those that would be the portion of the utility that would be covering the water treatment plant, the 23% of that. Some of the fire flow improvements and some of the looping, some of those water network improvements that came up in the previous presentation. We're assuming that those would be covered either through your utility reserves or through debt. And the distinction here is that those ones that are routine, you're covering, you're replacing a water line in a neighborhood, a sewer line in a neighborhood, those would be coming out of utility reserves. You're putting enough money away every year to do projects like that over time. The other projects that are, again, less frequent, like the water treatment plant, and the portion the utility would pay for that, for the replacement of assets within the water treatment plant, those would be funded through debt. And so assuming that those, again, would be smoothed out over time across generational ratepayers, so that one generation isn't getting hit just with that, but a more smooth over time. And you can see in the bottom lines there, we're showing what those annual contributions would be. So again, the grants, we're assuming about $600,000 a year would be contributed to the water utility. About $5.7 million a year would be contributed to reserves. So either you're actually going and replacing projects, or you're putting that into the reserve and saving that for when those assets do expire in the future. And then about $1 million in principal and interest payments to service the debt that would show up from the projects identified for those. And on the bottom line, you can see currently what's occurring. So, current approach, there's not a philosophy behind the annual grants and how much would come into the utilities. So it's more opportunistic as those projects show up and what makes the most sense at that point in time. Your last year in 2025, you transferred $4.6 million to your water utility reserves. And so there'd be a bit of an increase there. And then there's no principal and interest payments right now the utility is paying. So over time, again, that would be an increase the utilities would be paying for to smooth out some of those major capital investments. Same setup for wastewater. And this, again, just shows it's a similar philosophy. It's the same philosophy in the sense of how things are being funded. The numbers are obviously different here. The wastewater utility has less assets overall because you don't do your own treatment within town, whereas the water you do. So here we're assuming, again, the 20% of those depreciating assets, and as they expire, the grants are paying 20% of that over time. And so that's about $500,000 per year. The reserves, you'd be contributing $3.7 million per year. That's an increase of about $500,000 over what you did last year towards the reserves. And then the principal and interest payments. In this scenario, we're assuming because of the cost of those assets that you wouldn't take any debt on to replace those assets that are showing up over the next 10 years. And that those would all be carried through the utility reserve contributions. So I know there's a lot there. And so it's really for the revenue requirements to bring all those pieces together. It's bringing together your operations and maintenance costs, the transfer to the municipality from the utilities, and then the capital funding needs over time. And so, it's a pretty interesting visualization for water versus wastewater. And you'll see that distinction as I flip to the next slide. But here you can see the operations and maintenance and the municipal service payments stay pretty consistent over time. Again, there is some fluctuations and it's growing, but proportionally, it's pretty consistent. The increase you're seeing more dramatically within this bar graph is the capital side of things, and putting more and more away to your reserves for those assets that are going to need to be replaced in the future and or that you need to replace in the next 10 years. And so trying to get ahead of that and stay in line with that over time, which is obviously very critical to avoid any kind of rate shocks in the future and to make sure you can continually sustain service delivery. From an annual requirements, revenue requirements perspective, this is an increase of about 6% per year, plus or minus. Now, again, this is revenue requirements increasing, but this doesn't take into consideration more users coming online every year that would be contributing to that. And so obviously your rates wouldn't see that 6% increase. That would be coming down based on the assumptions we'll have to make around future consumption and future units coming online. So it's kind of a little bit of the inverse on the wastewater side, and it's obviously more significant because of the City of Calgary increasing charges to the regional customers. This operations and maintenance is scaling up quite significantly. As mentioned in the previous slides, that's largely because of the City of Calgary charge and tracking with that as they treat and dispose of the wastewater going to the city from Cochrane. The capital funding needs are proportionally even less every year relative to the operations maintenance costs and the service payments to the city. And then municipal service payment, you're seeing here staying fairly consistent over time. But the plus or minus 9% revenue requirements is what we're projecting at this point for the next 10 years. And that's largely, again, driven by the City of Calgary charge that we anticipate to increase in the next cost of service with them. So that gives an overview of our revenue requirements. For the allocation of costs and the rate design, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Devin to speak to those.
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so now that we've got overview of the revenue requirements here, the focus in the process on allocating costs is really about taking that big number that you can see in the bar charts as Chris was presenting and understanding, okay, what are we going to do with this and how are we going to allocate that amongst the different customer groups that we're working with here. So yeah, just to cover this quickly, and got my eye on the time too, I won't spend too much time on this. We'll kind of be covering the tips of the waves here, and this cost of service analysis can be a pretty technical exercise as well, so we won't be going too far into the weeds on it. But yeah, the intention here really is to recover the revenue requirements as we've seen from your different customer classes for each utility across water, wastewater, and storm in an equitable manner that aligns with the principles that we've established. So we'll just spend some time here covering how we do that, and generally this analysis is based on the best available data that we have, as well as industry best practices. There are some pretty standard approaches that are outlined for doing this from the American Water Works Association and comparable institutions, and so that's kind of the basis of the work that we've done here. So just a bit of a process that we followed for allocating costs here. So yeah, we start with taking those revenue requirements, which is essentially your budget as well, and looking at, okay, how does that split out into these different functional categories of costs. Some of those are administration, treatment, distribution. There are other categories as well. That's not all of them. And then we take those buckets of functional costs and then we allocate those to different cost drivers. And so these cost drivers are based on what we understand to drive costs for the utility, and they're also measurable so that we can associate these drivers of cost to customer classes in a way that allows us to compare across the different customer classes. And what this is recognizing is that the drivers of cost for utility are not just how much water everyone is using. There's other things like peak water demands that affect system sizing, number of customers that would impact the number of bills you need to send out, things like that. And so this analysis is really about recognizing all of those different drivers of cost as well. And then we work through distributing the costs to the different customer classes. And the idea with this is that we do this to inform our rate design. It's about doing our homework so that we understand based on everything that we've done, what is a fair allocation of cost, and how can we design rates that may not exactly achieve that, certainly not in year one, but that we can get closer to every year so that we can achieve the priorities that we're setting out here. So just some preliminary results here. So what you can see up on the table there is the customer classes as they're currently broken out. So we've got residential, single-family homes, multifamily, non-residential, and then irrigation as well. And then based on the rate setting model, which we've started to develop, and based on your current rates and the structure there, what is the current allocation of costs to each of these different customer classes? So you can see that currently residential is paying about 75% of your revenue requirement, multifamily about 9%, non-residential 12%, and irrigation 4%. And this work is being finalized, which is why you don't see actual numbers here on the allocations. We've done quite a bit of work with Sean and the team to kind of make sure that this is tailored to your context, reflective of the Cochrane system and all of that. So we're still finalizing that, but generally what we see, just in terms of the direction of change from our cost of service work compared to what you're currently allocating based on, is that residential goes down a bit, multifamily as well, non-residential increases, and irrigation increases as well. And I should note that these are not massive swings by any means. We're talking about 5% or less generally across the board. Irrigation is slightly larger, closer to 10%. And a big reason for that is because we've focused in our analysis work, which we're finalizing now, on making sure that we're properly allocating the peak summer usage demand and making sure that that is recognized and then allocated appropriately in the cost of service analysis. And so that's why you see a bit more of an increase on irrigation there. So yeah, that's what we're seeing, and we'll use this as a point of information as we get into the rate setting and rate design, which I'll talk about next. Yeah, so the intent with rate design here, as we get into this process, and I know it's not the first you've heard of it from us either, is looking at how do we bring everything together that we've been considering so far. How do we look at the revenue requirements, what we need to actually collect, the allocations of cost, as you've seen that we're developing, and also the priorities that we've set for ourselves, and understand how that actually boils down into a rate at the end of the day. A lot of complexities that end up in relatively few numbers. So obviously it makes a lot of sense to spend a fair bit of time making sure that we get that right and making sure that we're designing rates that are appropriate. And one option for this is to design different rates for different customer classes that reflect those usage patterns and cost of service that we've seen. So this is just a bit of an overview of some high-level options for rate design here. Generally, all of them are going to be informed, as I mentioned, by our priorities, which Chris discussed at the top there. And what you can see is just some different options for how a rate might be designed. So in the gold there, you can see that a fixed charge is generally always going to be a significant component of a utilities rate. And then there's different variable approaches that might be taken. A decreasing block rate would actually go down on a volumetric basis the more water a customer uses. Sometimes that might be done to incentivize industrial development or something like that. An increasing block rate, all about conservation, increases the more water that you use, which you currently have. And then seasonal rates as well, if we really want to look at curbing usage at certain points of the year. So just some options that we've been considering through this process. And yeah, we'll go next into a bit more on how that connects to our priorities. So in terms of the priorities that we've set and that are most strongly connected to rate design here, conservation, of course, is a huge piece here. So making sure that we're designing rates that do reduce that peak demand, that are promoting efficient usage of this resource. Revenue stability, making sure that you can sustain the service through time. And then fairness and equity, making sure that costs are distributed in a way that is equitable. And we'll have more on each of these, so I'll just go into the first one here. So in terms of promoting conservation, one thing that should be noted and I think celebrated here is that you've already done a lot on this. There's already a inclining block rate on your residential rates there. There is a significantly higher rate for irrigation usage. And I think I heard in the previous presentation, generally lower water usage per capita compared to comparable communities. So I think there's quite a bit that the town is already getting right here, but we want to highlight this to make sure that we can continue with that, and also make sure that we can make those minor or relatively minor adjustments, as we discussed, to align with our cost of service and make sure that this continues to be a priority and that you continue delivering on that. In terms of revenue stability, key piece here is as Chris had presented through our revenue requirements, making sure that we're recognizing all of these long-term funding needs for the utility, that we're relying on the best financial information that we have, where asset management plans and master plans exist that inform us about long-term funding needs, that we're recognizing those, and then some recommendations as we move through the process, as was already mentioned, is to take what we've done here in terms of looking at how are we using debt, how are we assuming grants are used for the utility, and look at that with a community-wide lens and consider that in the context of the entire community, because obviously we've been looking at this through this exercise, but our scope is limited to the utilities, and so understanding the long-term capital funding needs and how they fit into the broader context of the community is a key piece. And then as well, as we talked about with that example on the lateral services, advancing asset management work is a key priority for the future. Where that work existed, that is reflected in the revenue requirements that you see here. There's some great vertical asset management work for facilities that is reflected in those plans, but there's much more work to be done as well on a lot of the linear assets there. So continuing to advance that will be a key recommendation as well as we move forward. And then based on fairness and equity here, so this is about looking at rates based on the cost of service, making sure that we're making those adjustments. Perhaps through time, there's options for how we phase that, and making sure that we are generally aligned with that. But the bigger change that we mentioned as well off the top in terms of stormwater would be shifting to an approach that more reflects the actual cost burden that stormwater customers place on the system. Your current structure right now is charging the same rate, for a retailer with a large surface parking lot and a apartment unit, right? So there's definitely some work to be done in terms of equity there, and that is where, based on the rates that we'll be bringing forward and eventually working through, you'll see some bigger changes to that to reflect an approach that more accurately is aligned with parcel size for non-residential lots while maintaining that flat rate approach for residential customers. But that's where we would expect to see a more substantial shift to align with this fairness and equity principle here. And then last is moving into actual rate setting and forecasting. And so this work is underway. And you'll see that through the milestones, which we'll show next. But this is looking at what are the rates that you're charging now, and then putting that into a model so that we can understand what is the revenue that's going to be generated under different scenarios that we might consider for rates. So the results that you saw for that cost of service table, which show what your current revenue allocation is, those are outputs from our rate setting model based on your current rates. And so the work that we'll be doing, well, that we are already doing and that we'll continue to be doing, is testing different scenarios so that we can understand how do these align with our cost of service, are we recovering the revenue requirements that we've set out, and are we aligned with the priorities that we've generally set. And then this will take a long-term view as well. A key piece here is to avoid rate shock, to avoid substantial increases and then potentially less in the future. We want to make sure that it's a smooth and predictable trend for customers so that they can understand what's coming. And so providing a 10-year outlook to rates to achieve in alignment with all the revenue requirements that we've been developing will be a key output of this as well. And then just looking at our key milestones so far. So we are at the second splash of the council touch point there. So of course we're well along in this process. We're underway and largely completed for the revenue requirements, cost of service, rate setting and forecast modeling, as I mentioned. We're looking at that now. And then the next step here will be to bring rates forward through the budget process. So that will be the next time that you hear from us on that. And then in parallel, we'll be working on the reporting and approvals process there as well. So that's it from us. I guess we can, I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
Yes. Thank you, Council. We're happy to answer any questions.
All right. Council, can we get a motion to start the conversation? Don't all jump up at once. Councilor McDonald?
I will make a motion for option 1, that we receive the report regarding the utility rate review, preliminary findings for information. And it was very thorough, and I don't right now have any questions for you. Thank you.
Councilor Wilson?
Thanks, gentlemen. I thought of a couple questions. One, I was wondering what your thoughts were on, we just learned our water treatment plant was going to be approximately 77% eventually funded through OSLs, meaning that 23% would be funded by current residents. What are your thoughts on collecting that 23% through utility fees as opposed to tax increases, which allocates more directly to user pay in your estimation?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, maybe I'll take a stab at it right now. Chris will be able to fill it in. You hit it right on the head. That was a suggested model. It's not something that we have to do. It is possible for us to increase rates to fund the upgrades at the water treatment plant. I got to stress the water treatment plant is upgrades for capacity, but that money that's being carried through the rates or through the study that we're doing right now is for renewal of existing assets that are already at end of life. That's why a portion of it is funded through the utility rates. So I guess the short answer is yes, it is possible for us to consider a different model if that's direction the council wants to provide.
I was essentially, thank you for that. I was essentially asking, I guess your group, I actually don't know what I feel about that, which is the better way to fund that and which is more appropriate in a user pay system like I think we're trying to set up here on the council bench. Is it in your estimation through taxation or through utility fees? Or do you even have a thought about that? Perhaps it's a question to Urban too, if they had any thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I'll give that one over to Chris.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, I think in this context and the priorities that the town has set out in sense of full cost recovery for the utilities, the life cycle replacement of assets to deliver the service for water, wastewater, whatever it might be, should be a utility cost and should be borne by ratepayers if that's the function and the desired objective. It would be fairly common, in general terms, that utilities would pay for those kind of asset renewals over time. That's the intent of the utility rates, is to do that.
Thank you. And then just a little bit clarification on, you mentioned customer classes in your presentation, and it was pretty big. What are customer classes? What does that mean?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, so customer classes are the end payer, and they're typically broken out into a number of categories: residential users, which might have your more individual meters, and then your common multifamily users.
Right.
On a single meter, maybe feeding an apartment building with 20 meters or 20 units, for example, and then non-residential, so different businesses in town, and then also irrigation. And then there tends to also be a line item there for municipal services that would also be providing community service through different means.
Oh, simple enough. Okay, and then fairness and equity, what does that have to do with customer classes and fairness and equity? That wasn't completely unclear to me.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, fairness and equity ties into customer classes based on their impact on the system. So to give an example, if we happen to have a business in town that had a large woodworking component to what they do, the potential fire, let's say, that could happen at that property is significant and would require a large fire flow to protect the property. That in turn requires larger water mains, bigger fire pumps, larger water storage. Huge cost implications for us to be able to provide fire protection for those type of properties versus a residential property. That's where the equity comes in. We want to consider their impact on the system.
Okay, again, pretty simple. I just wasn't clear when I was listening to. Okay, I appreciate the approach you've taken. I see the principles and priorities, as you said, that I believe council's given you reflected in this, which is that we're trying to match cost to pricing, the cost accounting, the user pay philosophy. I appreciate the tack that you're taking, and look forward to seeing how it unfolds. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Verdeco.
I actually don't have any questions, but I appreciate the thoroughness of the report. Has there ever been anything like this amount of detail done before, and when was it?
Through the chair to Councillor Fredeco. I was ready for that one because you asked last time and I did some research. The short answer is no, we have never done anything this comprehensive before. It's the first time in Cochrane's history that we have gone through utility rate review like this.
Wow, like, well done. I mean, I think even just finding the holes that, you know, when you're talking about a difference between, I don't know what it was, 8,000 to 12,500, like that's massive, right? Of us not knowing some of those things. So just well done on bringing this forward and giving us the up-to-date information. We may not like all the things that are coming, but you have to know where we start, right? So that we can plan for the future.
Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, I'll double down just on that, just for the whole evening, that, and I'm really seeing a sophistication in the organization as a whole as we lean into asset management, which is relatively new to our organization. I think our asset manager just came into place this year,
yes.
Recent months, right? So asset management, we're finally being deliberate looking at that. We're finally being strategic in how we're looking at our utility servicing, and we're finally looking at the real cost through a 10-year capital plan as opposed to just the wish list. So, you know, I certainly applaud the team and being able to give council the information we need to be strategic. So I appreciate that. And I did want to just, I think probably just get you to affirm my understanding of here. One of the things that really struck me in your presentation is between the wastewater and water. So we control water, and so we can forecast how we're going to maintain and keep those costs affordable. But when it comes to the sewer, when we're just essentially a price taker of whatever the city of Calgary decides to do. And so those affordability costs we have no control over. And so that was when, I think I've always known this, but for me, it really affirmed that I want Cochrane to be as much as possible the masters of our own destiny when it comes to utilities and anything else that we could possibly do, but just seeing that stark difference between how we can control affordability and long-term planning for water versus wastewater. We're a price taker from the city of Calgary. So am I correct in that?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor McFadden, you're hitting it right on the nose. The gradualism of rate change, you guys have heard me talk about that a number of times before. We have less control on the wastewater side because we cannot control the wastewater treatment component of our wastewater charge. The increases that are projected for Calgary are significant. I am going to daylight them. I know we didn't put them in the presentation, but they're projected right now. They're not set in stone and approved yet, but I will say they're projecting 7% per year annually for their operation and maintenance charge, which is about half of what we pay. An 18% per year annually increase for their capital charge.
Wow.
That's why you're seeing that gap start to widen over the years.
And then, excellent. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for this summary, gentlemen. Much appreciated.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you. Just want to revamp whole thing in there. So 6% is from 2630, 2035 for water is for the capital requirement. And for wastewater, is it 9%? And the one you mentioned, 11 and 18, would that be counted in that, or how does that would work in there?
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Singh, could you repeat the end of the question for me, please?
So I'll do two steps in there. So first one, could you explain what is plus minus 6% for water, 2026 to 2035?
Yep.
And the second part is wastewater, 26 to 35, plus minus 9%.
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, you have it correct. That's the total cost. Looks like Chris has something else to add, so I'll open the mic.
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, those numbers being referenced are for your full revenue requirements, which includes operations and maintenance, transfers from the utility to the municipality for the services you receive from the municipality, and capital needs. So asset replacement or new capital that supports the utilities overall. And so that's 6% for water annually, and the 9% for wastewater annually includes all of those components together.
And that will be everything about what we hear in the previous slides in the presentation before, whatever, like 20 million, 30 million, whatever the number was. Would that be on top of this thing, plus 6, plus 9?
Sorry, the previous presentation, prior to ours?
Yeah, yeah.
So this stuff that we're covering is just for the utility and funded through the utility. The costs that were referenced previously are related to growth.
Yeah.
There is some of those numbers that were referenced, for example, like the water treatment plant that have a growth portion and a utility portion. Stuff that's utility portion, we've assumed within our numbers and are projecting that over the next 10-year period.
Okay. I don't know how I'm gonna phrase this question, but would you be bringing a range of options, like, you know, when you, not just the rate increases, or like in next when you come back, or like if I read it, like, you know, would the administration be able to bring forward a range of options, not just recommended rate increases, that clearly outlines the advantage, disadvantage, financial impacts, and long-term implication of each approach? And this could include operational efficiency, regional partnerships, alternate delivery models, additional grant opportunities, phased implementation, different financing strategies, and other innovative solutions, allowing council to evaluate a full spectrum of options before determining the most appropriate path forward.
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, while I do want to consider all of the other things that can come into the conversation as we learn more about grant opportunities or different funding sources, we will be bringing forward a suggested rate model, not multiple options, based on the information that we've gathered over the last 2 years to pull this together. It's hard for me to describe how much work our utilities team has put in, and I especially need to highlight Rebecca Carroll. She's been instrumental in this, and she has spent countless hours working on this. It is a lot of work to pull this together. Devin did daylight it. There is a lot of data and work that goes into this. So while I do want to consider the new things as we're coming up to the budget process, I'll say no, it'll be based on the work that we've done already, and we will revisit it again during the council cycle with the strategic plan, and we'll bring it up at that point and see if it's still the right model for us at that time. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no, but I'll take that. I'll wait for my, yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have no further comments. Other than to echo what I've heard around the bench a lot. It was very professionally done, and obviously a lot of hard work has gone into this. Thanks. Looking forward to the next steps. Did anybody have anything else to add? No, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
And I believe that brings us to the end of the formal portion of our agenda. Brings us into notices of motion. I have worked with our administration to bring ones forward, but as our procedural bylaw dictates, I need to relinquish the chair in order to move it. So I relinquish the chair to Deputy Mayor McDonald.
Very exciting. First time. I don't know how to bring this forward, though. Do I just read out the executive summary on behalf of Mayor Nagel? Perfect. Okay, so notice a motion from Mayor Nagel for non-residential development. One of Council's strategic objectives is to ensure Cochrane remains a competitive and attractive destination for investment. By streamlining our development processes, we are sending a clear message to the business community. We are ready to work with you to grow our economy. This review is not about bypassing necessary standards. It is about removing the barriers that prevent local businesses from opening their doors and creating jobs. And with that, I will ask Council, if someone would please put a motion on the table.
Yeah, so I'll move the notice of motion, then we bring it back at the next meeting. Yeah, sorry, I should have prepared you. So the motion coming forward will be that Council direct administration to review the current development, land use, and development permit process and bring back options to expedite and prioritize non-residential applications to support local economic development and job creation prior to the end of October 2026.
And we just leave that at that for tonight. Perfect.
Yes. Okay, I'm the chair again. Which brings me into my mayor's report. Just got a whole bunch of notes I'll rifle through. It's been a while since we've been here because, of course, we had our strategic planning process, which took up a lot of our time. But today we had a fantastic Stampede breakfast. Huge kudos and thanks to all the members of our staff who worked very hard to put that together. you know, it's easy to overlook how much work goes into these things, but I know there's a lot of people. I saw them working all the time, bringing everything together, and it went off very well. The reported number is 2,100 people came through today, so a huge success. Hopefully we'll do that again next year. Last night, myself and a number of members of council were at Minister Dreeshen's event. Many of us got to speak with important members of the provincial government, including ministers, including staff members in the Premier's office, and we talked about a number of our different advocacy priorities. So it was a really well attended event, a good use of our time. On Friday, I attended a Stampede event with ATCO and had some interesting conversations about utility lines in Cochrane. It was utility lines can only be so interesting. But and then I've also recently met with Qualico to discuss some of their items in South Bow Landing, all of which will come back before council and the public very soon. On Canada Day, I gave a speech detailing why I think it would be a mistake for Alberta to leave Canada via a separatist referendum. That speech received a variety of responses, but it does seem to me like a clear majority of the people I heard from agree with the position, and I've received a number of positive comments, but I've also shared with people that I'm not going to be diving into that topic any further, at least not for now, so I only brought that up because it was Canada Day, and I felt like I couldn't give a Canada Day speech that was honest and fulsome without touching on the elephant in the room. I also delivered 2 major grad speeches recently at Cochrane High and Bow Valley High. They were very big crowds. It's crazy how much those schools have grown. In the weeks prior, I met with the folks behind Walker's Reach to look at some stuff with their neighborhood. Again, they'll be coming to council and the public. Met with a football group who's beginning to think about life cycling their outdoor artificial turf in Cochrane. They have assured me they are going to exhaust every means necessary and possible to raise money privately before coming to the municipal government looking for help, although I suspect they will end up here at some point. Also had a group of about maybe close to 100 kindergartners come into this room, and we taught them about the municipal government. I had Lori to protect me, so that was very nice. It was very fun. I sat here and took a whole bunch of questions from the floor. We had kind of a mock council meeting almost. And then through my role as a board director of Digital Alberta, I also attended a speed networking event up in Edmonton. It was the North American Games Industry Summit. I took that opportunity to present information about our incubator to young startup companies. Had a number of interested people provide some positive feedback, but it ended up being a very international event, and so the ability for people to apply for a program was quite limited. Looking ahead, I have a huge number of Stampede events this week. We have obviously a very big council meeting next week and CPC, and then I'm very much looking forwards to a much needed summer vacation. That is my mayor's report. Thank you for suffering through it. Can I get a motion to approve? Councillor Singh? Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Councillor Reports? Councillor Singh?
So I'll echo everything Mayor you said, and thank you to the staff for organizing such a wonderful event. Everybody loved it. I had a chance to talk to the various members. I also want to give a shout out to Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Sandboy from Chestermere, and the IGR Tina for attending and supporting in there. Also, July 10th, SLS Center is celebrating their 25th years in the community. So they're having their barbecue, I believe, in the afternoon, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So get a chance to come out there, and happy Stampede.
Anyone else? Can we get a motion to accept council reports? Councillor McDonald?
Motioned.
All in favor? Carried. And I believe we have one more closed session item. Can I get a motion to go into closed session? Councillor McFadden? All in favor? Carried. So, Councillor Singh?
Yeah, and if you just wait, then Lisa will let us know when the feed is live, and then we can proceed.
Okay, so our closed session is over. We have a motion arising from the closed session. Can I get that from a member of council? Councillor McDonald?
Sure, I'll make a motion that council direct that the closed session meeting discussion remain confidential pursuant to section 29(1)D of the Access to Information Act, and further that council direct administration to proceed with option 1 as presented in closed session.
Any further conversation? All in favor? Carried. And with that, I believe the meeting is adjourned.